Hello and welcome to another Truth Proof live stream. And welcome, Paul.
Yeah, welcome, Les, and thank you very much. Another Thursday soon come round, hasn't it? But got a bit of a dry throat, but I think I feel a lot better than I sound. I think
You sound a little bit better than you did on Sunday's live stream.
Yeah, well, I felt ill on Sunday. I don't feel ill today. I just think I've probably just hammered my vocal cords coughing, but no complaints. All good.
No.
And a great guest we've got lined up to speak to.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, definitely. There's a few people in the chat, Paul. I don't know if you want to give any name call outs.
Yeah, will do. I can see DM Moon's son, Carl, Dan. Hiya, Carl, Karen Behrman, Malcolm Dodgson, Tom Waters, Tino, Mrs. Elaine, hi Elaine. I think Ian will be in. Mike the Disabled Welshman, Cat D66, Martin Abbas, Awake, Bridget Vanden Bosch, Steve T, Steve O'Neill, Steve O, Awake. We've said Tom Rivington, Pike Beast. They've got great names, these people, aren't they? Dragonborn, Lisa Odd, Lindsay, Joel Burgess, hi Joel, and Danny Tyler. There's a new name there, and Mark Anderson. Hi Mark, I got the information you sent me. Thank you very much. Beer Monster, a man after my own heart. That sounds good. And there's loads of names that I won't be able to say, which time just doesn't allow it. Deb Shaw's in. And we'll look forward to meeting up next week.
And if you've got any questions for Grant Cameron tonight, please put them in the chat in caps, and so I can see them, and we can bring them on screen later on. Thanks for all the support, you guys coming in the chat tonight, and we really appreciate that, don't we?
There's Gordon and Julie there as well. I love this support. Thank you, people. And yeah, let's get on with it.
Yeah. So without further ado, I'll do a disappearing act for now.
There we go, Les. That's it. Well, I think we were going to have Grant Cameron on last week. So, Grant, welcome to Truth Proof.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for your interest in what I'm doing. I hope we can educate people and give them some of the answers to their questions.
Massive interest in what you're doing. I heard you speak at the Awakening. I don't know, it must be probably 5 years ago now. You'll know the date. But before we just jump into that, for people that don't know, I mean, Grant Cameron, you've been researching the subject of UFOs, unexplained phenomena, since about 1975, author of numerous books. And I'm not going to go into the list of accolades and achievements, but there's a lot, let me tell you. So if you've not heard of the name Grant Cameron, people in our chat, you've been living under a stone, because this man's got a lot of knowledge. So, Grant, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. You're absolutely. So, Grant, before we jump into your research, and I'm fascinated because I know you've done a bit of a U-turn from where you started, which is brilliant that you're not setting that paradigm that I'm not changing, my mind's made up. How did you become involved in subject?
I was a young 21-year-old going to university and couldn't figure out what I was doing in university, how you could possibly make money with what I was learning there, calculus and stuff. I figured, like, this is a total waste. I couldn't figure out what I was doing there. And I was raised very religious, which is part of the story. So I had heard the story in 1975. This would be 50 years ago next May, that there was a small town outside. I live in the coldest major city in the world. It's Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And this is about 35 miles southwest of the big city I live in. And they had reports in February of 1975 that there was this UFO called Charlie Red Star flying around. So I'd never thought about UFOs or extraterrestrials. I was interested in Edgar Cayce and weird stories and stuff. And I sort of had the understanding that, there was miracles in the Bible, but that kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore. So anyway, I said to my friend, I said, let's, instead of driving around the city and doing nothing, why don't we go out and see what they're looking at? And my friend said, okay, we'll do that. And we never did, because neither of us really had any interest in it. 3 months later, the local TV station went out there and captured this thing jumping from the ground. And if you know the Nimitz story, the Nimitz went from the story of the Nimitz, the UFO went from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second. This was caught on film going from the ground up to 5,000 feet in 1/8 of a second.
Really?
And they played this on the TV and they replayed it, and it was frame by frame, and they were showing this. And I said to my friend, come on, let's go see what they're looking at. And I always talk about it as you buy the lottery ticket. You buy the lottery ticket, there's a chance you're going to win. But we're not going to see anything. We're not going to win. There's no way we're going to win the lottery ticket. And we went out there. We drove in the town, out of the town for about an hour, looking around, what they're looking at. And we couldn't really, were they looking at stars, planets? I didn't know what they're looking at. I said, whatever they're looking at isn't very significant. So my friend said, okay, we'll go back into town one more time. If we don't see anything, let's go home. I said, fantastic. It's been a total waste of time. We turned the car to go back in, and it flew right in front of the car. It was like, and nobody in the car said, is that what it is? Is that what they're looking at? It's like, everybody went, there it is. It's like, holy, it was just like, wow. And looking back 50 years later, it was like they wanted me never to worry about sightings. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about what I was looking at. This is like the most bizarre thing. And it was like, oh my goodness, miracles do happen.
Did you know that? Did you know that? Did you actually form that opinion straight away, Grant?
Oh, absolutely. I just could. I was floored. I just could. I mean, the thing was moving. It was moving very slow. It was very low to the ground. It was only a couple of 100 feet up, maybe half a mile down the road in front of us. It was sort of bobbing up and down like a bobber on a fishing line. It was sort of moving up and down as it flew along, very, very slow, 35, 40 miles an hour. And remember, it was going behind a set of school buses that outside the town where they stored all the school buses. And I was getting out of the car. The car was still moving. I was getting out of the car because I wanted to run through the ditch and across this parking lot because I knew it was going to go in behind these school buses. I wouldn't be able to see it anymore. And I remember I got to the school buses and then I was just watching, and it was just, and it was sort of pulsing, and it was just flying off into the northeast. Dragged all my friends out. 2 nights later, I dragged them. I said, oh man, you got to see this. It's the most unbelievable thing you've ever seen in your life. And they were there for 1 hour, and then they said, we're going home. I said, no, you got to see this. Don't go. This is amazing. And it was like 1 o'clock or 12:30 in the morning or something like that. And they said, no. I remember they said, no, Grant, we're going back to Winnipeg. We're hungry. We're going back to Winnipeg for pizza. And it's like, okay. And all my friends took off, and there was 28 people. There was people all over the place trying to see this thing from the big city. And where we were, there was 28 people. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was like all these car stops. So I like car stops, another car stop. And there was 28 people with my friends. And by the time this thing actually came, 15 minutes after my friends left, there was 8 people left. And I can still remember the second night it came directly at us. It was flashing. We had some kids that were doing science fair projects. And they were sitting in the field, and we were standing on the road. And then there was this flash, like a flash cube, the old flash cube. And then the one kid said, is that it? And I go, I guess so. It didn't look like what I'd seen the first night. I guess so. And it was boom, boom, boom. We called it the bouncing ping pong ball. Boom, boom. It was jumping around the sky. It was bouncing all over the place. And I remember the car beside us, we had about 5 people in our car, and there was 4 in the other car, or 4 in ours and 4 in theirs. And they had a guy that had a motor camera. It was a Nikon camera that had, if you remember, motor drives that would advance the 35 millimeter film automatically. Yeah. These had just come out. So you had this film, and I guess he had 36 shots there, whatever. And I remember as this thing was coming, it started to flash. It started jumping around this guy. It was jumping around. And then I could just hear him. There was people yelling and screaming and swearing. And, it's just people, pandemonium going on as this thing was coming at us. And there was this girl in the car. There's 3 guys and a girl. And the girl couldn't see it. And she's going, God, she's crying. I can't see it. Someone show it to me. I can't see it. Where is it? And I could just hear this click, zzz, click, zzz, click, zzz, click. And these guys unloading the camera as this thing's coming at us. And then it sort of came at us. And then it was turned out to be as it got flashed, it got closer and closer together. Then it turned out to be the same thing I'd seen the first night. This glow, almost like it was alive, this glowing, pulsing object, but it had a green glow on the back of it. And it came at us, and then it turned and it went back off into the northeast, sort of where it came from. And then as it was flying away, I go, that's pretty cool. That's an extraterrestrial from another planet. I said, I felt so lucky. It's like, wow, I actually got to see this thing. And then the people got in the car, the Roadrunner, it was like a courier car. And I remember the gravel was flying, and they went chasing after this thing, because you could actually chase this thing. We chased it the one time. I drove right off the end of a road at maybe 40 miles an hour trying to chase this thing, because you could actually catch it. You could actually gain on this thing. It'd be very, very low. So we spent, a year and a half, and then these objects started to appear on the ground. Now you call them orbs, which you've seen in crop circles and stuff. But back then, nobody knew the word orb. We called them ground lights. And these things would appear on the ground a year later. And we studied all this. And then I got this book, and I put the whole book together. I interviewed a lot of the people in the town. Over half the people in the town claimed to have seen it. Nobody wanted to admit they'd seen it, but if you confronted them, they would admit, yeah, I saw something. And so I put the book together, and that's when I went to a local publisher, and it was a famous story. And I remember her saying to me, the rejection letter said, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. count me among the unbelievers. And I went, what? Are you kidding me? And I said, that's it. No more sightings. And I wrote in the beginning of the book, sightings are things you can tell your children when you grow old and gray, but they don't prove anything to anybody. It's just a story. And so I was not interested. And I thought, man, I was looking at this thing and I said, because I remember it was just flying away the second night. I'm looking at it. I'm going, that's pretty amazing. Could be extraterrestrial. And then I'm thinking, what's it doing? It's not doing anything. It's just flying along. It's not doing anything. And so then I think, what's going on here? And then, all I was interested in is what's going on. I knew that I was a young guy. I didn't have any answers, but I said, somebody's got to know what's going on here. And so that's why I chased the Canadian government in the early 1950s. And that led to the highest level source I think anybody's ever had. We wrote a book called UFOs, Area 51 and Government Informants. Talked about an informant who was the chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, which is the top.
Grant, I'm dying to listen to that, but can I just stop you and ask you just why? Otherwise I'll forget. Why was it called Charlie Red Star?
Well, it looked like a red plasma object that was flying along. Right. So there was actually a woman who wrote a poem about it, Chief Charlie Red Star, like Aboriginals. We've got a lot of Aboriginals here. Chief Charlie Red Star in the nighttime sky. And she wrote this poem. Everybody was sort of involved, and it was in the newspapers. And they said, "Shop where Charlie Red Star shops," and in the newspapers and stuff. So in the local town, it was a pretty popular thing, but. It sort of was there for a year and a half, and then it just sort of went away, and they've never had a sighting there since. I don't see anything.
Did anybody else then? When this thing's the I don't know, the enthusiasm for it all dissipated. Yeah. Was it reported anywhere else at any other locations?
No, not. No. This was basically in this one town and a town about 11 miles from it. But no, in fact, the guy that was he just actually passed away. The guy who owned the airport, his name was Bob Deemer, the local airport there, and it was a landing strip that was only open during the day, so people can't say it was planes because there's no planes flying at night there. And so I remember talking to him, and I said, Bob, how many sightings do you have? Because he was right there, and he was the tour guide. He was taking the TV crews out and stuff like that. And he said, I don't know, 150 sightings. I said, okay, so how many sightings you had since 1975, 76? And he said, I had this one. He starts talking, and I was on the freeway. And I'm going, freeway? We had no freeways. Where were you? He said, Arizona. I said, no, in Carmen. How many sightings have you had in Carmen since 1976? And he said, none. Until I went to interview him 2 years ago. I went to interview him, and there was a sighting just before I got there. But other than that, he had no sightings.
Do you know, and I'm sorry I stopped your train of thought when you were talking about the government, but that's fascinating in itself that you went to interview him. So you took with that your enthusiasm, your thoughts. You know where I'm going with this. And do you think you were a catalyst to revive something else and create another sighting?
Yeah, it seemed like because there had been nothing there for, almost 50 years. And so it was kind of, I was bringing a TV crew. There was a Rob Freeman, who was a guy who has a big TV array or camera array with all sorts of different types of cameras. He's a pretty wealthy guy. And he runs around, and he had a sighting at 12 years old, and he wants to reenact this. So he travels the world trying to film UFOs. And I was bringing him and his crew out there, and that's when this sighting happened. And I don't think they've had anything since 2 years ago, but it was just that couple sightings just before I came there. And that's always the thing. Like when I had my first sighting, or the sighting that got me going there was the one where they caught it on film. And that, when I look back, I realized that this was probably not an accident that I saw the first sighting. Yeah. Because what happened is we weren't going to go. If they hadn't filmed this thing in May of 1975, I never would have gone because I had no interest in the thing. And so what happened in the May of 75 was there's this TV crew. There was two different networks out there. There was the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and then there was this private network that actually got the film. And they would be out there, and they almost got it the one night, and then they went in and they told the assistant news producer, "We're going back out again tomorrow night." And he said, "No, you're not." He said, "I'm not paying no more overtime. You guys want to chase these stupid flying saucers? You can go on your own time." So what they did is they actually got a crew of reporters, volunteered, and a film guy who was a film editor. He never shot a TV camera before his life. In 1975, the TV cameras are these huge cameras. So he'd never shot a camera before. And so I interviewed all these guys that were a part of what we called the CKY film. And there was about 10 people. There was, I think, 4 or 5 pilots in that group. And there was the editor of the newspaper and all sorts of high-level people there. And so I remember him saying they'd gone down, it was sitting on the ground, and it was sort of glow up and it would glow back down, it would glow, and the glow would go back down. And he was sitting there looking through the viewfinder. He was 8.25 miles away. So they took one car, went north, one car went south, and they were going to try to come in and capture it. And the one car from the north came across. It was right there. It was right behind these trees. And he said it looked like a drive-in movie screen sitting on an angle behind these trees. It was blood red. It was like this, but it wasn't touching the ground. It was hovering off the ground. And then they looked, they went, and then they tried to get their bearings because they're out in the middle of the country and they're trying to figure out which road are they on, and so they can go back and check the ground later. And they then looked back and the thing was gone. And they went, oh, it disappeared. But meanwhile, it had jumped in the air. It was like, boom, like that. It jumped up in the air. And the guy on the other end is looking through the viewfinder, and he's looking, and he said, we got to get something on film. He said, they didn't get anything last night. I got to get something on film. So the next time this thing glows up, I'm going to shoot. And it's almost like the UFO said, you ready? He pushed the trigger, boom, jumped. And he caught it jumping off the ground. And that's why I said, and it took me years to realize that. And I'm going, that wasn't an accident. It wasn't an accident. He just happened to push the trigger as this thing jumped in the air. And then I'm thinking they needed me out there because I wasn't going to go. And I went out there, and then all the rest of I took maybe 100, more than 100 people out there on tours because people wanted to see what it was, and I take, okay, come on out, we're going to go. And the ground lights and the big UFOs and stuff like that. And everybody just went on with their life. I'm the one that fell off the edge of the earth. I couldn't get enough of it. So I started this chase looking for the answer to who is this and what's really going on here.
What would you do then, Grant? I think we already know answer. If you got a phone call, an email saying it's started again, Grant, back to 1975, you'd go. I bet you'd go back tomorrow, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'd go tomorrow. But if there was a UFO in Carmen today, I wouldn't go because I have no interest in sightings. Like people will do the Skywatch stuff, and I go, if you saw what I saw, because people will be in a Skywatch and they're looking at something, they're going, it's moving. No, it's not. It's moving. It's a star. It's a planet. No, it's a balloon. No. I go, wow, man, if you've seen what I see, you're going to be going to bed just like I'm going to bed. Good night. Because like I've never, what I saw was pretty clear. I mean, it was, and so I've never been interested in seeing an alien or anything. I'm just interested in what's actually going on. And I've had some offers. I mean, I had the one where I was going to Mount Shasta, and I got a message indirectly through people from this alien being by the name of Antarel. This is Mission Rama, if you know the Mission Rama group. It's a big group of 25,000 people that go around the world and do sky watches, and very religious, and they can open these portals, Zendra things from time to time. And the message came from Antarel. Antarel knows you're coming to the mountain, and there's going to be a program, they call it programmed sighting Saturday night. So there's two people get a message that says Saturday night at 9:33, there's going to be a sighting. That's exactly what happened, right over my head. So when it came, I knew they could open these portals, Zendra stuff. And then I'm thinking, as we're going there, we're all traveling. It's a 3-day trip from here to California. And I got the phone call came on my assistant's cell phone. And then I'm saying to her, get the message. Like, Antarel, this from Antarel, what's the message? And then I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to get into one of these Zendros where you're actually like 15 feet away from this alien, and he's telepathically telling you stuff, because they'll take 7 people at a time into these Zendros. But I wasn't really interested. I thought, oh, well, maybe my assistant could go, or this other girl that invited me, maybe they could go. I'm not really interested in going into a Zendro and seeing an alien. And then I thought, well, the message is directed at me that he's going to do something. And so I said, okay. So, and they do this fasting thing. So then I start fasting and all this kind of stuff, and the mantras, and what they'll do in these events in their Skywatch thing is they'll raise their vibration. So they'll do meditation, oming, prayers, yoga, and stuff like this for about a day and a half. 125 people sitting in a circle, they raise their vibration, and then their idea is that the beings lower their vibration and they meet in between, and they can have these encounters. So that was the thing. And I was going to go check these stories about these people who had been face to face with these beings. And they've had the best story I've ever heard comes out of that group. I mean, just absolutely stuff that you can't even possibly imagine the sightings these people have had. Okay, then, Grant. And I brought your train of thought because you were on about the government, the Canadian government. So yeah, so I went to the Canadian government, and that's when I learned the probably the most famous document, I think, is the Canadian government document written in 1950, where Wilbert Smith, who was running the program, and people now, the Canadian government is saying, no, it was part-time. It's like, baloney. We've got the actual documents where he said, I was the official head of the Project Magnet from 1950 to 1954. He was the head of this program. And he was a radio engineer. He ran all the radio stations, including all the intelligence communication channels. And he was down in the United States, and he was interested in the whole UFO thing was starting up. And he said he asked quite discreet inquiries through the Canadian Embassy in Washington. I was told the following things by American officials, not by people on the street, by American officials.
Okay, yeah.
Flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. There's a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush that's trying to figure out what's going on. The subject is of tremendous significance to the Americans. And we were also told by, and this I didn't realize till years later, I was also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. The Americans aren't doing very well because they said, if we're working on the problem, they're willing to exchange credentials and talk to us. So that was the main thing. So Wilbur Smith, basically, according to his son, told him while he was dying that, yeah, he saw the bodies, he was showing the crafts and stuff like that. And so we chased Wilbur Smith. I got all that material. I talked to his wife. She told me about the attempt by the Canadian government to land a UFO, told me all these bizarre stories about this alien by the name of Alpha. And that led to this Dr. Eric Walker, who's the highest level source I think anybody's ever had, chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis. And that's where DARPA comes from. He was he was a trustee on the board in 1958 when DARPA runs all the black budget programs in the United States. This is where it was created, out of the Institute for Defense Analysis. This guy was the chairman of the board at one point. And we had a number of conversations with him. There was actually a guy out of Liverpool, England, who was doing the main interviews with him. And there was all sorts of researchers. So I'm not really into interviewing people. So people would say, oh, I can get Walker to talk. I said, okay, here's his phone number. Here's his address. And there was about 8 people or 10 people around the world who tried to get this guy to talk. And he would talk in rhymes and riddles. He basically said, you're wasting your time. You're never going to get the answer. Why should we change the rules and regulations to satisfy your curiosity? What do you know about ESP? Unless you know about ESP, you will not be taken in by the control group. The control group is an elite group of people. If you were in the group, I would know. And all these rhymes and riddle things. And so we had him. We wrote the book UFOs Area 51 and Government Informants, which was written at the time of Area 51. We were researching Area 51 as it happened. So I've got all the Area 51 stuff about the 115 material and stuff like that. Then Eric Walker. And then Walker said he was going to hand over some of his material to the Truman Library. And that's when I thought, I'm going to go get Walker's files. We're trying to find his file that he had from 1950. That's when he was the head of weapon research in the United States, assistant in the Defense Department. And I went to the Truman Library, and that's when I said, I'm looking for Dr. Walker's files. And there was a couple letters from Walker talking about Walker or something, but there was really nothing. And they had a bunch of telegrams from 1952 from the overflight of Washington by the UFOs, and they chased them with the jets and stuff. And Truman had given a shoot down order on the Saturday, and then the next Saturday they appeared again. So all these telegrams are coming into the White House. I said, Mr. President, don't shoot him down. Don't shoot him down. So they had these telegrams, and they showed me these telegrams that had come into the White House. I said, what else you got? No, nothing else. I go, you got nothing else? It's like, I thought, the president's the most powerful guy in the world. He's got to know what's going on. And so I went down the road to the Eisenhower Library. It's a couple hours west of there. I went to the Eisenhower Library, and it was there that I asked them, and they had 5 documents. And I said, how many pages have you got in the archives? He said, 28 million pages. You got 20 million pages, and you got 5 documents on UFOs. And so then I started this pursuit of running from presidential library to presidential library, trying to find what the presidents knew about UFOs, how many had sightings, stuff like that. And they basically, everything's done orally. There's no, there's no written documents. And then in 2012, I had the event where I'm watching Colin Andrews give a lecture on crop circles. It's almost like 1975. I'm not really interested. I couldn't care less. I just went in the room because he was a famous researcher. I figured, well, I'll go watch. I've never seen him lecture before. Went in the room, and I got this download that basically said, this is all about consciousness. And that shifted everything. It was sort of like, then everything started to make sense as to what this is, what's going on. And I made that sort of turn. But for the number of years, and I think now I sort of understand what's going on, what may be involved. It's a little bit different than other people interpret. But
do you feel the years previous to that then, Grant, were wasted or still a grounding?
Yeah, they're wasted, but they were necessary. You have to go through that sort of frustration of whatever. Almost like the UFO community, the same thing. For the UFO community, a lot of frustration until 2017 when the New York Times comes out with that article. And, you know, we never, I mean, I wrote an article in 2009 called the 64 Reasons They've Decided Not to Tell You the Truth. And in that article, I talked about there's no way they're ever going to disclose this thing. No, there's no way. And then in 2017, the New York Times says, oh, yeah, by the way, the U.S. government is working on UFOs. And I went, I couldn't believe it. I was like, holy cow, they actually admitted it. There's still the you know, what it is, they're still covering up. But for all those years, it was like we're spinning our wheels. We weren't getting anywhere. It was like, and I you know, people maybe get upset, but I say, you know, you're running around chasing lights in the sky. You can do that all you want. And if you take a look at one of the latest interviews that was done with James Lukatsky, who was the guy who ran the OSAP program, the big UFO program. It wasn't the biggest program, but it was a UFO program that had been set up. And he said there's 200,000 sightings, and every single one of them, according to him, were different. They're all different. And I say all the metals are going to be different. All the aliens are going to be different. And I wrote a book on called UFO Sky Pilots, 36 people who claim they've flown the craft. And when I went and looked at that, when I saw this other data, I went back and I looked, and sure enough, everybody, there's the same sort of like a dream. There's a scenario that goes, but all the details are different. So you have these people who all say, I touched the craft was alive. When I touched the craft, I became one with the craft, and whatever I thought was what the craft did. And you can go from here to the other side of the galaxy instantaneously, but everybody touched something different. There was not a single story. One touched the beehive, one touched the ball, one had their hands on the end of a chair, one touched the button, one pushed a joystick. Nobody did the same thing. And I go, what's the chance that 36 people are all describing the same story, but doing different things? And that's where I say the individuality of the whole thing, that all humans are different. All leaves on a tree are different. All snowflakes are different. And that's one of the things that we sort of we're looking for patterns in UFOs. And there may not be a pattern because we're part of what we're seeing.
And do you think then, I mean, you've got your unique take on this, but do you think then that the phenomena itself, the science, whatever it is that's contained within it, is giving us all a slightly different experience, but it's the same source that it's coming from?
Well, it may even be us that's creating the experience.
Well, that's basically what I'm meaning, Grant.
Yeah, this is the whole thing, is that people don't. There's even the guy. I don't know how much people are familiar with all the intelligence type stuff, but Kit Green was one of the guys around the weird desk at the CIA in terms of paranormal phenomena. He was the control officer for the remote viewing program for the CIA. So Kit Green actually states that people can be having the same experience and see two different aliens. Yeah. And it depends upon your belief system. And there's even a story that's told by Colm Kelleher, who was the manager of the OSAP program. Colm Kelleher tells a story about it at Skinwalker Ranch. And you have these scientists or whoever, he doesn't identify who the people are, and they've all got these Gen 3 night vision goggles. So the UFO comes over the ridge and it flies right by these guys. And they all take their Gen 3 glasses and they watch this thing fly by. At the end of the night, they compare notes. Everybody saw something different. And they all were looking at the same thing. And that's this whole thing, is this idea that it's all going to be sort of different, that what you experience. So this is the idea that the example I sort of use is the Ouija board. People say, oh, on a Ouija board, it's terrible. You shouldn't use the Ouija board. It's like, no, the Ouija board is just like a hammer. It's a tool. That's all it is.
Honestly, Grant, I spoke at the Awakening this year, and you're actually taking words out of my mouth. I said it's just a tool to get us to that location. And I said, like, UFO researchers see UFOs, ghost hunters see ghosts, but ultimately I think it's all coming from the same source. Yeah. But sorry to butt in there, but I just couldn't help saying it because it's the same kind of language.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. So it comes down to this thing about vibration. Everything is vibration. Tesla said it. You hear it now over and over again. Everything is vibration, and it's where you're vibrating, co-resonance. So if you are in a negative environment and you using a Ouija board, get ready for a ride of your life. But if you're, and that's where you get people will see grays or, things that are not very nice. And then you see a lot of people will see these angelic beings, like angels or like energy beings that are completely the opposite end. And that's what we have to remember, is that we're part of what we're experiencing. And it's the whole idea of co-resonance, that whatever you resonate with, it's the same in psychedelics. I wrote a book called the Psilocybin School. I did 27 high dose sessions with psilocybin because I wanted to figure out, I wanted to get in the field and see what this is about. And I was like, I said, okay, I'm ready to go to school and all this sort of stuff would happen. I had 5 sort of really fearful experiences, hellish type experiences. They all started at the very beginning, but I would go in very nervous and very, very tense and stuff like that. And it would be this whole idea that you were waiting for something bad to happen, and then it would happen. And then you would say,
so the mindset that you went in created the environment that you experienced.
And then I would be in it, and then I would do this thing, which is very important, a principle of parapsychology, or this whole thing, is that I'd be there, and then I'd go, it's going to go on forever. They make you think it's going to go on forever. This is for the rest of eternity. This is what's going to happen. And then you go, okay, I chose this. I can't blame anybody else for this. I chose this. This is the way it's going to be for the rest of eternity. And like that, it was gone. Boom. It's like, I'm out of it. And then I would write, and the beginning of the book, the psilocybin book, I actually wrote, surrender is the rule. Believe me, surrender is the only rule. And that's how the whole paranormal thing works. I wrote a book called Contact Modalities. So I look at 70 some odd different ways that people get in the field. The idea is everything's in the field. All the answers are in the field. And certain people, through hypnosis, through psychedelics, through meditation, through near-death experience, can get in the field. They see the material. They bring these answers back. And so that's my whole conclusion, is that what happens in psychedelics, the same as happens in regressions, which happens in meditation, is what happens is you shut down the default mode network. The left brain shuts down. And this is done at Imperial College. The psilocybin experiments are doing psilocybin college in London, where they know this, that the brain quietens down, that left brain, the little voice that's talking all the way, and it's analyzing, and it's you're full of it, and I know what's going on, and that ego thing. And what it does is, like meditation will quiet, they say it's quieting the mind. No, it's quieting the left brain. And then the left brain quiets down, and all of a sudden, hey, I can get the signal. The signal is there. Or as one channeler said, God talks to everybody, only certain people are listening. And if you can figure out how to listen, how to shut the noise down, you can go
hard, isn't it? It's hard, because as soon as you start to analyze it, it sort of shuts down. Like you said, the subtitle of my second book was Beyond the Thinking Mind, because all of whatever we're wanting to experience, in my opinion, and I'm echoing what you're saying, really, is there beyond the thinking mind. And I'm having a great time, people, here listening to Grant. So I don't know what anybody else is doing. We're not coming to questions yet, Grant. We have another 15, 20 minutes, but I butted in again. Just carry on.
That's where it sort of moved to this consciousness thing, that you can't understand the UFO phenomena until you realize that it's going to be, it may be all consciousness. It's, for example, you can get things like, people will have the UFO experience and they'll basically say time and space seem to stop. Like people, the one guy, they asked him, they said, Ron Johnson, he's a guy out of Utah. They said, Ron, he's in the craft. Where would you like to go? And he said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. And they said, okay, Ron, it's going to take about 1 second. He's sitting in the chair. He said, it's going to be a very intense G-force thing. And imagine it in your mind. As soon as you can imagine it in your mind, we'll go there. So Ron is sitting there and he says, it's like intense G-force. And he said, boom, like that. You looked out the window and there's the Milky Way off in the distance. And so that's like 50 to 70,000 light years, which simply means if that is true, and he had that experience, then we got something wrong with time and space. We don't understand time and space very well. And that's the whole thing. And there's a book that has just come out, which I recommend to people. It's written by Pierce is the last guy's name. The book was here. No, it's in the other room. Pierce is the guy's name. He wrote a book on coma. So I did a lot of study on consciousness, various consciousness things like near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, meditation. I've done all those sort of things. The one I missed was comas. I didn't realize this, even though my best friend, his wife had a knee operation and picked up H1N1 before. It was a pre-COVID virus. Right. She was in a coma for 16 days, an induced coma. And when she came out, I remember she told this horror story of what happened when she was in this coma. And you think that a person's in a coma, the brain waves are flat, there's nothing going on, and the person's sleeping. And there's a book that's just been written. Actually, I got a guy out of Britain. His name is Pierce. It's called Coma. And it's unbelievable. It's just like, you read this book, it's like horrendous stories. And everybody's got these stories. And so another woman, after I read the book, there was another woman had COVID. I asked her, I said, do you have something when you were in a coma? She said, yeah, I got raped twice in the coma. And it's like, holy cow, you hear these stories. But anyway, he in there, he talks about the fact there's one woman, she was gone for 60 years and she had 4 children. There was one person under a coma, it was for 3 weeks or something, that was gone for 100,000 years. But you see that same thing in DMT experiments. I have a guy who's has the biggest catalog of paranormal stuff. It's 7,000 items. He's an AI expert, and he's worked with DMT. And you see in those things, DMT is about a 10-minute long experiment, and people will report being gone for 1,000 years or 2,500 years. And when the coma people describe it, in the near-death experience, people describe it as it was more real than the real world, or the out-of-body experience more real than the real world. The coma people describe it even worse than that. They say, this was not a hallucination. This was not my imagination. This actually happened to me. Like, it actually happened. And they're gone for 100,000 years. If that's true, and these people, you can look at all the coma stories. There's a huge number, and there are all these horrendous stories of what happened. Then you got to realize that we got something wrong with time and space. There may not be any time and space. And so I say, Paul, if there's no time and space, then how big is the universe? Yeah. Is there, and as John Wheeler, the famous physicist who was the intellectual successor to Einstein at Princeton, said, there is no out there. It's a participatory universe. And that's where you get this idea, it's happening in your head. Or if you have remote viewing people, so you do remote viewing, and the person says, okay, here's the target, 4537093, and the person goes, okay, I'm there. You don't hear the guy say, hang on, I'm flying there, I'll be there in a minute. It's like, no, you're instantly at the target. And that's the whole thing. You're not going anywhere. You're going within yourself. It's all within you. And that's the idea I had in the contact modality book. It's all within yourself. You can go within yourself, whether it's an out-of-body experience, a near-death experience. You're not going anywhere. You're going within yourself, and you're picking up the material.
So after death, this flesh, blood, and bone that's gone, the essence of you, me, and everyone else is still there. That's just infinite. Is that just going into the everywhere, the outer nowhere?
I think the ultimate sort of analysis of it is that we are in the spirit world now, and we are having a dream of being physical. That we just have this, and it's the idea that you can, like the one experiencer, his name is Yossi Ronan out of Israel. He talked about these green beings that he encountered in early 1980s in Los Angeles. And he said, when we come into your world, we take on a body. We can take on any body we want, but we don't need a body. We take it on to work in your world. You can do the same thing. You just don't know it. Or the other woman, I had two women in London who are, I don't know if you've interviewed them. They deal with what are called the beings. They call themselves CHON, CHON, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. And they don't have any faces. They don't have anything because they don't want to be known as human beings. They're just beings. And I remember the interview with them. She said, oh, they want you to interview them. I said, really? Okay, cool. I'd like to. So and it was either me or someone asked them the question. They said, so are you extraterrestrials? And they said, would you like us to be extraterrestrials? We could do that if you want. We could do that. We could even take you to our planet. But no, we're not extraterrestrials. We've always been here. You're the visitor. And that's this whole thing. You hear over and over again now. They've always been here. They're here. There may not be any out there. It all may be here, a singularity in time and space, because it started as a singularity, like a singularity of consciousness, and it appears like that there's time and space. But what's happening with the UFO experience people is when they start talking, there's no time and space. It all disappears. They can't tell how long they've been gone. And then you start to realize that it may not be what we think it is, because what we're doing is, in the left brain wants to use everything with things that we perceive. And the end result, as I come to it now, is that everything we perceive is probably going to be wrong. We perceive the world as flat. Why? Because it looks flat. We perceive that the sun goes around the earth, and we can do measurements. We can reproduce it. We can do predictions when the sun's going to come up, when it's going to set. And that means the sun's going around the earth. No, that it appears that way. Until 1911, until a gold foil experiment was done, everybody believed the atom was solid. And when they did the gold foil experiment, they realized it was all space. So we perceive that things are solid, but we now know they're not solid. And that's the whole thing. So we perceive there's time and space. There may not be time and space. We perceive that these things are aliens. And in my next book, I have a book coming out. I was going to call it the Super Bowl, and then someone said I was going to get sued for it. So it's going to be called the Big Game. It's the whole thing that everything is. This is teaching us the big game of all times, and this is this idea that everything that you perceive may be wrong, and that it's this sort of world of Maya, the Eastern idea of Maya, that it's all created, and you are just a spark of divine, and that in the end, God did not create the heaven and the earth. God created the sparks of the divine, and you and I are creating the universe through consciousness. And I don't know if you've done, like I've done a lot of study on the consciousness stuff. So I did this stuff with Michael Newton, who did the life between lives, 7,000 regressions of people, took them to the last life, let them die, took them in the spirit world, and they all tell the same sort of story. And in there, he talks to people. He said, "What are you doing?" The guy said, "I'm making a rock." And he said, "You're making a rock?" And he said, "Well, I can't do plants yet. I can't do," and this is this whole, people talk about between lives, they build stuff. And there's a guy by the name of Mark Sims who came on the UFO scene, had this very dramatic experience, and then he was a very wealthy guy, and then he got so harassed he left the field. I think I haven't heard about him lately, but he wrote a book about what Tejabbar was, the being that he was dealing with, that gave him how the whole thing worked. He was with him inside his body for 13 days, downloading all this material to Mark. And he puts this chart. When I saw the chart, I said, "Hey, that's Michael Newton. That's the same chart as Michael Newton, where everything starts as very like amoeba and stuff like that. And it goes up. And as you get more and more advanced spirits, they can build bigger things and bigger things. And at level 15, I think it is, there are entities that are building galaxies. And that's the whole thing. So we're building this stuff out of consciousness. It's all built out of consciousness. It's all waves. There's no physical world. Even if you break down the physical world into atoms, into subatomic particles, they're fields. They come in and they go out and stuff like that. And that's what we're starting to realize, that the crazy UFO people and the crazy channeling people and all these crazy people are going to end up being right. Everything they said was actually right. And quantum physics is just one step behind us. And they're starting to bring this stuff about the multiple universes and stuff like that, or multi-universes. And they're proposing all this stuff. But that stuff's been talked about in the UFO community and in the paranormal world for decades.
So what you're talking about now then, Grant, and you've done lots of research regarding the governments and presidents.
Yeah.
Does some of the higher echelons of power subscribe to what you're saying, or do some know it and don't talk about it? Because, like you talked about the directive to shoot down the UFOs, surely they're just wanting to weaponize something. Do they realize they're just chasing smoke?
Yeah, well, there'll be different levels. So people say the government, and I always say, well, who are you talking about for the government? Like I always tell the story. I worked as a facility manager at the University of Manitoba, and I say, listen to this. I had the keys to the president's office. I had keys to the 8 vice president's offices. I had the keys to the payroll. I had keys to human resources. I had keys to everything except for the police station. I had keys for everything. I had like thousands of master keys, and I could get into anything. I knew all the codes and stuff like that. And I said, everybody assumes, oh, you worked at the University of Manitoba, you knew everything at the University of Manitoba. I knew nothing. I just knew my little job that I did. And I said, if I knew everything, do you think I would have left 6 months before they bought everybody out and lost hundreds of thousands of dollars? Do you think I would have left early? I didn't know. I was fooled like everybody else. And that's the whole thing is, so you have different people at different levels who know certain things. And as Walker said, it's a very elite group. The people who are running the show are a very elite group. Unless you have the mind of Einstein, you would not understand this stuff. So it may just be a handful of people, and yet you get some people have worked on it. Like we know the CIA's worked on it, DIA's worked on it, and stuff like that, because they're all working on weaponizing this stuff. So when they go to Skinwalker Ranch, they don't go to Skinwalker Ranch for UFOs. If you read Jacques Vallée's diary, 1996, 1997, end of 96, beginning of 1997, Jacques Vallée makes 2 entries, and he says, sort of like the Bigelow, like, what are we doing here? There's no UFOs here. Like, what are we doing at Skinwalker Ranch? This is a waste of time. And but they didn't go there. Lukatsky was in the Middle East, the big DIA guy, and they were reading the Skinwalker at the Hunt for the Skinwalker, and they were all fascinated with this stuff. And what they saw was all these bizarre apportations and stuff like that, and cattle mutilations where people are standing right beside them and don't see what's going on, and they go, wow, would we love to be able to do that? Or talking in people's heads and stuff like that, putting messages in people's heads. So that's why they went there. And what they're looking at is the stuff like the famous story of the bulls. The guys, all this stuff is happening, and his dogs die and stuff like this. And he said, I hope they don't touch my bulls. He's got these 4 prize bulls that are worth.
So it already offered the suggestion when them bulls got put in the container. Is that what
in the trailer? So he looks at this thing, and so when you see the DIA people, they say, man, would we love to be able to put 4 bulls in a trailer, man? Do you imagine? And that's what they call slide 9. If you see the briefing slide 9 is this one where they try to scare the living daylights out of the Congress. And it says, oh, you can put stuff through metal. That's the bulls through the trailer. If we could get this, if the Russians get this, we're dead. If they can figure out how to do this. And the woman goes with the groceries. She has the groceries, and she brings the groceries home and puts them on the counter and puts all the groceries away, goes to the next room, comes back, and the groceries are all back in the bag. And there was like 20 of these things where postal loggers would disappear and all this sort of stuff. So there's actually in my a book called Weird, Apports and Manifestations. I show a 1974. So this is going back a long time. This is over 50 years ago, a 1974 DIA document talking about apportations. So they know the phenomena, and they're trying to weaponize this. So they says, and I'll paraphrase what they said. If we could develop the apportation phenomena, we could go to the enemy. We could go into the vault. We could get the documents. We could take them to Washington. We could photocopy the documents,
put them back.
Take them back, and they wouldn't even know we were there. And that's in a DIA document. So that's what they're looking at. Everything can be weaponized. So when you get these special forces guys that are hunting the skinwalker, they're there, and it's the phenomena is reflective. So they're hunting the skinwalker. They're all armed. They're all these, special forces guys. They're not afraid of anything. They're walking along this road. And I heard the story that the voice came in their head and said, leave. You are not welcome. And they were petrified, and this cold front was there, and this fear, which I had this experience in 75, this fear comes over you. It's like you get too close to the phenomena, or it puts this fear in you. And so they're saying, we're hunting the skinwalker. And the phenomena goes, hunting the skinwalker? You want to play that game? Oh, we love that game. We love that game. And so they're just playing the game. And the phenomena is reflective of what you do. So if you go in there, like some people say, there are people getting injured. So the one there was an event happened in the state of Georgia. And they told me, these people got injured. One guy died and one guy had cancer. I said, really? And they went in this portal. I said, they went in a portal? Really? And I said, let me ask you a question. Were they armed? And you said, well, of course they're armed. The special forces guys. We're all armed. I said, you're all armed. You're going to a C5 event. You're all armed. She says, well, there's rattlesnakes and stuff like that. So everybody's got their gun. And I'm going, you don't take a gun to a C5. This is a reflective phenomena. If you have an idea where you're going to shoot this thing, even this idea of the pilots where they have the brain lesions, they get too close. So you've got a pilot, and he's trying to shoot this thing down, and he's trying to get close to it or ram it or whatever, and he ends up with a brain lesion. This is reflective. You got to be careful what you're doing. This phenomena is neutral. It doesn't really care. It doesn't care who you are or what you do. It's going to be reflective of what you do. And people got to realize that we have this idea that there's good people and bad people, and there's bad Russians, and the Russians think we're bad, and we have this good bad thing, and it's all neutral. Everybody's trying to save the world. Everything thinks they're saving the world, and everything is reflective of the way we think. And that's the idea with the Ouija board. If you go in there with a bad attitude, and you're going to pick up negative stuff, but you're never going to pick up negative stuff if you're in the right frame of mind, or if you try to protect yourself or go through these things to protect yourself, then you're raising your vibration up.
And most people, I wouldn't say all people, but most people who use the board probably already have that at the back of the mind, that it's going to conjure up some kind of strange, dark, sinister entity. So they're creating what they're worried about it, in effect. Do you think then, Grant, jumping slightly away from that's at times of great bereavement, and I've said, people tend to see their loved ones and things. Are they creating the loved one, or is it actually a spirit? Your views on that?
Well, my father, just 2 days before my father died, his father came to him, and I always say to people, so why did my grandfather come to my father before he died? Hang on. Yeah, there is. Can you take a break? I got to get this call here.
We'll
it's gone. It's gone now. Okay, go. Yeah, it's the doctor phoning. So anyway.
No, if it calls again, just
Yeah.
say, and Les will just put you out of
Yeah.
room for it. Yeah.
So I say this whole idea about like, so my grandfather comes. So what if my grandfather lived 10,000 lives or 100 lives? Why did he come as my father, as my grandfather? Because if he didn't, my father wouldn't have known who he was. Like, what's this guy doing in my room? But he was the idea, and that's the whole thing. So, what did he reassemble his particles and reassemble himself as a human being when he's actually in the grave? And this is the whole idea. It's all Maya. It's all this kind of a Maya illusion type stuff, where we think there's a physical world, and the beings are able to appear as anything to get us, and we're seeing things we don't realize. We're part of the phenomena. It's not this physical world. That's where we got to move away from this idea that there's something out there that's interfering with, that's interacting with us. It's all this one thing that we may be part of it. We may have brought it on. We may have made agreements. So you and I may have made an agreement before we were born that you're going to do a show, and I'm going to come on your show, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. This all may be less random than people think, because people want to believe the random world, that we're victims. And everybody knows that as long as you pretend you're a victim, you're never going to get over anything. You've got to take control of the situation, and once you do that, then you can move on. But if you're a victim and you as we're doing now, we're saying, oh, these aliens, they're out to get us, and they're going to eat us, and I go like, this idea when they ask Bashar, who's the race? Linda Howe asked Bashar the Chandler, who's the race we should be afraid of? And he said, you. She said, what, me personally? No, you, the human race. And that's the thing. We say these aliens are evil, and they're doing all this sort of stuff. And I said, well, like, what are they doing? And well, they scare people, and they do this, and they mutilate cattle. And I say, when they drop the first atomic bomb and melt 100,000 people into the sidewalks, or when they firebomb cities like they did in Japan and cremate people at 1,500 degrees, over 900,000 people. When they do that, give me the petition. I'll take a look. Maybe I'll sign the petition against the evil aliens. But until then, it's this reflective phenomena that they're just sort of opening up our I call it shattering naive reality. They're doing weird things. So there's a book that I'll eventually write called The Theory of Wow. And I say, what are the UFOs doing? And I say, they ain't doing nothing. It's like when I first saw the thing, it's like when the thing was flying away the second night, I'm going, what's it doing? It's not doing anything. And if you look at, say, for example, the same year that I started, Bud Hopkins had his started. Now, Bud Hopkins had a sighting in 1964, and he tells the story. The thing is, he's driving these people from Britain down in the Cape Cod. And he's driving along, and all of a sudden, boom, there's this flying saucer in the daytime hovering above the car. And he's looking at this thing going, what is that? And they're all looking at it. And then the next day he goes back and he draws the route to see how long it was there and this sort of stuff. It didn't do anything. And if you ask people when they see the UFO, what was it doing? It wasn't doing anything. And they say, hey, Paul, do you think it wanted you to see it? Yeah, I think so. Do you think you the only one saw it? Yeah, I'm the only one saw it. And it's this idea that, and it's like, what's it doing? It's getting your attention. Why do UFOs have lights on? They have lights on them so you can see them. They want you to see them. We don't have lights on our plane except for landing lights, navigation lights. We don't have any planes, so why have the lights? And they do these weird things that they just want you to go, what is going on here? Like they drop metal. And I talk to people about these, I call it apportations. People say, oh, this metal is important. We can
get molten metal type.
Yeah.
Thing.
And they say, well, we're going to build a flying saucer. I even said to Hal, I wrote Hal Puthoff. I said, Hal, come on. You know about apportations. They're dropping this stuff on purpose. They're just dropping this stuff because people go, look at this metal. Holy cow. And people work on it. And every single piece is different. And what they're trying to do is get you the idea. We're not alone. Something's going on here. And people just are in awe and curiosity. And that's basically what it comes down to. Unless you're curious, if you think you've got everything understood in the world, you're never going to research anything. You're not going to put any money into research. But when you're in awe and curiosity and you go like, why is this happening? Why is this experiment going this way? Then you get curious and you put in effort and money and do research until that. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get us to figure it out. And they're trying to get everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody's trying to get money for research and analysis and stuff like that. That's all they're doing. They're making you curious. I call it the theory of wow. They just do these really weird things that shatter your reality. You say, no, the world can't work this way. That's why I say, if paranormal phenomena are real, The world is not the way people say it is. There's something going on. Or Gary Nolan, the guy who does all the metal research from Stanford University, he said, I'm not interested in the 95% that falls within the bell curve. I'm interested in the 5% outside the bell curve. That's where the Nobel Prizes are. When something's outside that's in an oddity, when you figure that out, that's when you get it. As long as you think you've got it all figured out, you're never going to do any research. You're just going to reproduce your results, and your ego is going to say, I've got this all figured out. It's all perfect. And that's why when you have trauma events, it educates you, because then suddenly you realize, oh, the world is not the way I thought it was. And you have to rethink things. And that's what you're doing, is that all events are opportunities for education.
Yeah, and we'll go to questions in a moment, Grant. But I know you said that when these things reveal themselves, when they show themselves, but they're doing it to certain individuals and lots and lots of different levels of intellect. Do you think that the intelligence that is the phenomena recognizes that somebody as the brain of Einstein and somebody else as not the brain of an amoeba, because that's would be wrong to say, but quite a lower intelligence, yet they're interacting with lots of different people? Is it just the essence of the spirit of a person, the integrity of a person that they're interested in, do you think?
Well, I think there's all these people will talk. I'll ask people about experiences. I'll say, do you think you chose to do this? Are you on a mission? And they'll go, yeah, I think so. I don't know what it is, but I think I'm on a mission. And this is the whole idea of Michael Newton, about the idea that the people you meet are not random, that you meet people for certain reasons, and people are different levels. So you and I may be working on the paranormal phenomena, and somebody may be just learning how to put their kids through school and how to learn envy or greed or whatever. Everybody's here for different lessons. And whatever you've been given, if you assume this thing that Michael Newton talks about, the fact that when you die, you only get asked one question. You go in front of a council between 3 and 12 people, and they ask you one question: Paul, how'd it work out? And then Michael Newton say, everybody says the same thing. Oh, I could have done better. I was going to do this, but I forgot. I was going to do this. And you can't say, the dog ate the homework and my mother-in-law upset me or whatever. They're going to go, time out. It's not about you. It's about you. And that's, so the whole bottom line comes down to, why did we come in the world? That's this whole idea of UFO people are looking at what's really going on. Why did we come in the world? Who are we? And what happens when we die? And when you realize this idea that we're part of the plan, then you come into the world and you realize you came here to do something, and all you got to do is worry about is, what am I here to do, and am I doing it? What everybody else is doing is totally irrelevant. And so that comes down to this idea that it's all this one thing, and it becomes much more spiritual. What I say about the UFO phenomena is, it's going to be way less physical than people think it is. It's going to be way more spiritual than people think it is, which is really going to upset people, because people always say, oh, it's the religious people. They're going to, all commit suicide or whatever. I go, no. Let me tell you, when this thing actually gets revealed, it's going to be the scientists who are going to be the guys fighting on the cyanide pills, because you paid $50,000 a year to go to MIT, and then suddenly somebody tells you it's all bull. Half what you believe is wrong. Come on, I paid $50,000 a year. I know everything. And that's the whole thing, is this idea that it's going to be a lot less more spiritual. It's going to be 1,000 times more complex than people think it is, and everything gets more complex. People assume that we know everything and that we got one more piece. And the government just gives us this one piece and we'll understand the UFO. No, it just gets more complex as you go along. And the example I use is the amoeba, for people who believe that the world is random and it's happening. The amoeba, we say, it's an amoeba. It's just a small little amoeba. What's the big deal? It just reproduces, whatever. If you take an amoeba has 12 quadrillion atoms in it. That's 12 with 18 zeros after it, atoms. So you drop these atoms into a bowl, and then they have to reproduce. We have 3 billion base pairs in the human body. An amoeba has up to 670 billion base pairs. So what you do is you have these 12 quadrillion atoms. They all know where to go, the right three-dimensional spot, the position at the right time, and they reproduce 670 billion base pairs without a mistake. And you look at it and you go, like, there's no way it's happening by accident. It's this idea, and then it can reproduce itself. It can produce life and stuff like that. And you realize the more you look at anything in the world, the more complex it gets. It's more complex and more complex and more. And that's why I say the UFO phenomena is getting us down that path, that it's going to be 1,000 times more complex. The more I look at it, the less I think it's ET, the more I think it's this really weird thing about how the universe actually works, and that it's not really physical the way we think it is. And the last thing I say, it's going to have no hint of capitalism. There's going to be no idea that the aliens have no interest. They have leather furniture. They don't have no chandeliers. They don't eat. They don't drink. They don't sleep. They have nothing. They're just this very primitive sort of do a job type thing. Whereas we're into this idea about whoever's got the most toys when they die wins. The aliens have nothing about that at all. They're not here to get anything. They don't need anything. And you have 40% of all experiencers say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. If you take a near-death experiences, 31% of all people in near-death experiences say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. So if you're on an alien ship and they give you the answer to everything in the universe but take it back from you, they know the answer to everything in the universe. They've got all that material. They're in the field. They don't need to come here and study plants and study DNA and stuff. They know everything. They're not here to do that kind of stuff. They're here in this sort of awakening thing where they're shattering our naive reality and moving us ahead rather than coming down and giving us a lecture. We want the left brain thing. Come down, land on the White House lawn, and just give us a lecture, give us the technology, and then get the hell out of here. And they're doing the right brain thing. They're coming down like a crop circle. It's like a symbol. You got to figure it out. Like, what's that crop circle? Oh man, there's a bigger one. And everybody's trying to figure it out. They're using the right brain symbol thing to force you to figure it out rather than coming down and doing your homework for you. You can't do your kids' homework, and they can't do our homework.
Grant, absolutely brilliant. Thank you. We've not done yet, but we're going to go to questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
And if you've got to leave for a phone call, that's all good.
Yeah.
Alice.
Hi. Yeah. And thanks for the show so far, guys. Really interesting.
This guy.
Right. I've got something on my screen from Jojo, and it's I won't put it on the screen. Something for you, Paul, in relation to something that happened at Driffield, and there's some sighting as well from a possible witness.
Yeah, there's just before we get to some questions for Grant, then it's been an interesting week, and a lady's managed to film some objects over Driffield. I believe what day are we today? We're Thursday, Tuesday night. But people have been reporting a strange humming sound in the area. I mean, Grant can comment on this if he wants afterwards, and because it's all pretty materialistic, actually. Yeah. All the alarms went off on my property yesterday morning, and car alarms were going off all over town. I don't know if there's any connection, but we've got all that cluster of activity. But that's about it, really. But go on, Les.
Okay, so Lisa Odd is asking, can Grant tell us about his downloads? Were they instant, or did you gradually realize you had all this information?
They were actually both. First, I thought it was the first, that it all came with one thing. So I'm watching Colin Andrews, and what I was using is the contact modality of daydreaming. So a lot of people, if you're daydreaming, if you go walking, a lot of people get inspiration by walking, and the idea will suddenly pop in their head. And the idea is you've got to relax you got to shut down the left brain. So what I was doing is I didn't want to watch Colin Andrews talk about crop circles. I couldn't care less. And I went in the lecture because I thought, I got to watch this guy. So I'm sitting there and I'm not really paying attention, and I'm watching him and whatever. And it just came instantaneously. And what it did was it put three ideas in my head at the same time. One was what I've already mentioned, Dr. Eric Walker. We're talking to him. And at one point he says, hey, let me ask you a question. They're talking about the control group. A guy from Britain is interviewing. They're like, what's a control group? Like, questions about who they are and what they're doing and stuff like that. Let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And then the guy said, yeah, I really don't know anything. He said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in by the control group. Very few people understand. So he was talking in rhymes and riddles. So in 2012, in February, when I'm watching Colin Andrews, suddenly I went, oh, that's what Walker was talking about. It was like, it suddenly made sense. And the other thing that came into my mind, the second thing was, I mentioned before, the top secret memo. The Canadian government top secret memo said we were also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. So again, it was like, Walker. And then the Canadians were talking about mental phenomena. And then the third thing was a guy named Jan Hartson, who was the international director from MUFON, had a sighting when he was 9 years old and was fascinated with propulsion. And Ben Rich, who was the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, was giving a lecture in 1993 at UCLA to the engineering alumni, and he was there, and they were asking him all these UFO questions, and he was talking about, you know, the fact that he believes in both types of UFOs and stuff like that. And as he's leaving the building, Jen Hartson realizes he's got to talk to this guy. This is his one chance to get this question answered. And he said, Ben, I've been fascinated with UFOs my whole life. I need to know, how do they get here? How does the propulsion system work? And Ben turns around. He says exactly what Walker said in 1991, 2 years before. He turns around. He said, so let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And Jen Hartson said, it means everything in time and space is connected. And Ben Rich said, that's how it works. Turns around, gets in his car and drives away. So these three things came into my head, and I go, oh, that's it. It's consciousness. And it's like, for 2 days, I'm walking around in a daze. But later on, I realized things came more and more. It's like it expanded as the years went on. And I started to realize consciousness was more complex, because I make the joke that in 2012, I couldn't have spelled consciousness. I couldn't have cared less. I had no interest in, and it just sort of came to me. But it's become more complex, where I started to realize like the entire world is this consciousness thing. It's more, not just ESP. It's the whole idea that the entire world may be made out of consciousness, and we're creating the world, and this very complex worldview that I now have in terms of what's going on, which means some people in the government will know, but not many people really know that end result. They're into portals, which is one of the things I was told. I knew the CIA was working. One guy in the CIA was very interested in portals, claimed his wife had come through, they had gone through portals. His wife was an extraterrestrial, and like a really wild story. And this whole idea of portals, the idea that that's how you move from one place to another. It's not like you're flying anywhere. You just pop in and you pop out.
Brilliant. Thanks, Grant.
Okay, I've got a question from let's have a look. Bridget is asking, what's Grant's most remarkable story he's heard regarding the Sasquatch / UFO connection?
Okay, so Sasquatches I really didn't do. I pay more attention now. You'll hear people will be talking about the fact that Sasquatches are, again, consciousness. They're not really, they can appear as Sasquatches. They can go back into this sort of field, and that they're not really physical. I did have an experience in 1996. It was the year after my sighting occurred. There was 32 horses disappeared in a field about 20 miles north of the town of Carmen. And I got a report there that there was a Sasquatch seen outside the Air Force Base on the south fence. So I went to investigate this. There was only about 5 houses on this south fence on this road. And this thing had been looking in this 9-foot window. The woman had a child in the middle of the night, had colic. She was up with this kid, and this suddenly she looks at this Sasquatch is looking in the window, and she just freaks out. And the dog across the street was on a metal chain, and apparently almost choked itself. It was trying to get off the chain so bad to chase this thing. And there was an Aboriginal tracker when I went there. He gave me a tour. He showed me in behind this woman's house. And what you got to realize, I'm in an area where there really are no trees. We make the joke that the national tree here is the telephone pole. There are no trees. It's like a wheat farm. It's all wheat, and it's flat. It's the flattest area in the world. So we have this joke. You can let your dog go and watch him run away for days. It's so flat. So there's just a few trees behind her place, and there was a sort of a creek running there, and that's why the trees were there. And this tracker showed me it had gone on the snow, and the snow had melted, and then it frozen again. And this guy was 250 pounds. And he said he didn't break through the snow, but this thing had broken through the snow. So it was very, very heavy. And it had gone, and he showed me as it went into this sort of little grove of trees, the broken branches, and why does the Sasquatch break the branches? It's almost like it wants you to see this. It breaks these branches, so everybody's going to go, oh, look at the branches. Like 9-10 feet up, these branches all broken, whatever. And it goes in, and the footprints go into the middle of the clearing, and then they stop, and they don't go anywhere. And that, as soon as I said that, it's like the UFO let it out to go to the bathroom, and now it's picked it up again. It's like, and so I knew right from there. I said, "There's no way in Manitoba with no trees, a 9-foot Sasquatch is going to hide behind a telephone pole. There's no way it can hide here. It's getting picked up. So I always knew that. But now, as you go along, you'll see very common phenomena with Sasquatch where they can appear, disappear. They come in near-death experiences. They have the apport thing. They throw rocks. They do that kind of stuff. It's all the same phenomena. It almost goes back to if you're familiar with where the contact modalities came from Ray Hernandez, who did the survey of 4,200 UFO experiencers who had encounters with non-human intelligence. And he had this experience where he was pulled out of his car on a freeway in Miami in a traffic jam, and he was pulled into the sky, and there was all this wheel that was spinning, and these beings were there, and you could see the images, and there was remote viewing and paranormal phenomena and psychic phenomena and UFOs and stuff, and the wheel is spinning, and the beings are saying to him, you got to quit parsing this stuff. It's all the same thing. And that's this idea. So Sasquatch, and it's all going to be connected. It's all going to be the same bottom line, that nothing is physical. Everything can come out, and it can appear as whatever they want. Even aliens, I'll maintain them. All aliens are different. And I've got even patterns before 1947 where you'll see this reflective quality. Before 1961, there was no grays. I don't care what anybody says. There was no grays. Grays appeared in 1961. And the girl that had the first one was Nancy Tremaine, about 3 months before Betty and Barney Hill. But before then, if you look at the chart of all the beings, you'll see beings with bubble helmets, like white, clear bubble helmets. Well, that's right out of science fiction in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. And you'll see these beings and little beings, and every being looks different. Same as I maintain, all UFOs are going to be different. All metal is going to be different. All trees are different. All snowflakes are different. And so the Sasquatch is a part of the phenomena. And the more I talk, I do interviews with lots of Sasquatch people. They'll talk about the telepathy. They'll talk about the apports. They'll talk about all this kind of stuff. It's just a different way of expressing it. It's like, it's almost like you've got on another planet. They've got, they say, oh, we got this planet. And they've now discovered the nuclear bomb. And they're about, we've got to awaken these people. We've got to raise their consciousness. What should we do? And the grade 1 class says, I know what we do. Let's put some crafts and let's put some lights on them and fly them around. They say, oh, that's a good idea. And then the second grade class says, oh, let's put crop circles. Let's put these weird crop circles. Hey, that's a good idea. We'll do that. And then the grade 3 class, their project is to mutilate cattle. And then the grade 4 class says, oh, let's make these Sasquatch things. Let's get these Sasquatch things going. And it's the whole idea is it's all the same thing, where it's like things that are waking us up, and people are doing it. But when you go back to the same thing, nothing is going to end up being physical. It all breaks down into this consciousness thing that's alive. It's conscious and it's one, which is basically the main message of everything. Everything is alive, everything is conscious, and everything is connected. There is no separation.
Comprehensive answer there, Grant. Thanks for that.
I want to ask, but carry on. Let's go.
Okay, Melvin Sousa, a good friend of the show, is saying, Paul, hope you get yourself better.
Thanks, Mel. I feel loads better. It's just the voice that's took a battering with coughing, but I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, I'll put this one up from Steve.
It's good to hear
71. Yeah. Did Grant know Paul Hellyer? And what do you think of his contribution to the ufology, being a former high-level politician?
Okay, I knew Paul Hellyer. I can tell you a few interesting stories about Paul that are important, because people sort of get confused. Because he was the Minister of Defense in Canada, everybody assumes the same thing. Oh, the guy knew everything. He knew all about UFOs. And I remember I had a meeting with him. He had the Canadians had tried to land a UFO in 1954 at a place called Suffield, Alberta. It was a top secret army base, and had no fly zone like Area 51. And Paul, in a speech in 1967, the Canadian Centennial had opened a UFO landing base outside a city, and they built this landing base for a tourist attraction. And Paul said, oh, when he's Minister of Defense, he said, oh, this isn't the first time we had a UFO landing base. We had one at Suffield, Alberta in 1954. And he said, nothing landed, therefore UFOs don't exist. And then, of course, me and another researcher went, hey, what's he talking about? So we went to him and said, hey, Paul, how did the UFOs know to go to Suffield? How could you open Suffield unless you had communication with the aliens? And then he was saying, oh, this expert told me about this. He was with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. He was an expert. He was in the Defense Department and stuff like that. And I couldn't remember his name. And I wrote on my website, I go, come on, I can't remember his name. Like, make up a better story. And then he was really upset. I had a meeting with him in Washington, D.C. And he said, Mr. Cameron, I may be many things. One of them isn't a liar. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. And I go, well, you couldn't remember the guy's name and stuff. And he said, look, when I was Secretary of Defense, he said, I couldn't care less about UFOs. I was busy putting the military, because the Canadian military is all together. Like, it's just one service. There's not the separate Air Force, Navy, and all that kind of stuff. And he said, I was putting the forces together. There was UFO reports coming in, but I didn't pay any attention to it. So that's the one thing people got to realize. Paul didn't know anything when he was Secretary of Defense. You assume that they know. No, he wasn't interested. He didn't get briefed. He didn't know anything. What happened was, when the book Roswell book written by Corso came out the day after Roswell. He had gotten the book from somebody, and he owned a bunch of cottages north of Toronto. He was reading this book, and his son comes along and he goes, "What are you reading that garbage for?" "That's garbage, man." And he goes, "Really?" It's like, and so the son goes, and a couple weeks later or something, the son comes back and he says, "Hey, Dad, I talked to a 2-star general in the United States, and he said it's real." And so he said, he wants to talk to you. So Paul phones this 2-star general, and Paul says, "So is it real?" And the general says to him, "It's all real and more." And then Paul goes off the deep end. It's just like, anything anybody says, Paul's repeating it. He has no filter. And he's repeating these stories that other people are just telling. So his stuff isn't important, but because he was this minister of defense, everybody believes it. Everybody believes that all this stuff's happening because Paul said it was happening, but he was just repeating what other people said. The one story that he did say, which is extremely significant in how this game is played. So I was in a conference with him. I was sitting beside him when he told this story. We're in Toronto, and there's this, it was like the citizens' hearing where they were asking questions, the senators. This time it was a bunch of reporters. So 6 reporters asking questions of Stanton Friedman was there, I was there, and Paul Hollier was there, and Richard Dolan was there. And we're going around, question. And the first time it comes around, they said to Paul, they said, "So who in the Canadian government knows what's going on?" And Paul says, "I really don't know. The head of the Privy Council, maybe." And he sort of, you can tell he's sort of guessing. I don't know who knows. And I don't know if the prime minister's briefed or whatever. And then it goes around the next round of questions. It comes back to Paul, and then Paul says, "I do know somebody who knows." And he tells this story, and I'm the mouth hanging open. It's like, holy cow! He starts telling this story. He says, "I got a phone call one time from an Air Force guy, and the Air Force guy says, I got a friend of mine who's dying of ALS. He's got Lou Gehrig's disease. He's dying, and he's got something he wants to get off his chest, and he's decided you're the guy he wants to tell." So Paul says, "Yeah, okay." And he says, "Phone him." So Paul doesn't phone the guy. And then the guy phones him back, and he says, "Hey, Paul, the guy's about to go off the cliff. You better phone him up. He wants to talk to you." So Paul phones the guy up. And the guy was the former head of emergency management in Canada. So in the United States, it's called FEMA. And this is the relationship in the United States that I'll explain in a second. So Paul, this guy, he's the head of emergency management. So if there's a nuclear attack, if there's a major hurricane or something like that, this guy, has all the connections to all the military, all the different units, and he can move people in places, stuff like that. And so he says, he says to Paul, "It's real. They briefed me." He said, "When I was head of emergency management, they took me down to Langley, to CIA. And he said, it signed my life away. It signed everything. It's like, it signed everything away. And they told me, this is real. It's actually going on." And I actually went to Area 51, and I sat inside of one of the crafts. And I'm listening to Paul. It's like, wow, he told you this? It's like, wow. So Paul says that then the guy ends up dying. But the connection is, so the idea is that if something happens, you have to have people briefed. That's the one guy you're going to brief, is the head of emergency management. If there's a landing on the White House lawn, or there's an attack or something, the head of emergency management. So if you're familiar with the Blue Book, if you go to the Blue Book files, you'll see a very innocuous sighting. This is 1964. This is when the Kecksburg crash occurs in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, December of 1969. There is a message that comes in to the Blue Book, and it says, Project Greengrass I can't remember the code name, Greengrass or something like that. Project Greengrass. There's some metal that has come down in Michigan. This is as this thing comes across Michigan, it comes across and it ends up crashing in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. And actually, we asked Walker at one point, hey, because he lived there. We said, were you at the Kecksburg crash? He said, yeah, I was there. So what? And he said, was it a UFO? You're trying to make me talk. I'm not going to tell you. But he was at this crash. But anyway, it came across Michigan. And so in the Blue Book thing, it talks about this metal that had fallen on this path going across the United States, and it had been recovered. And it was Project Greengrass. So when we looked up, what's this Project Greengrass? It turns out it's Mount Weather. Mount Weather is outside of Washington, D.C. This is where they take the president if there's a nuclear attack. It's an underground facility where they put all the vice president. When 9/11 happened, they took a lot of the senators to this place. And there was one of Stephen Greer's witnesses who was a lawyer who said that he was with Eisenhower at this Mount Weather underground, and that the president was talking about UFOs. And that would be the perfect place. If you were going to hide it, you put it in FEMA. It's in Mount Weather. And that's what the lawyer for this lawyer guy worked for Eisenhower said, that this is where they tracked all the UFOs. Because if there's a nuclear attack, all your bases are going to get wiped out. But this facility has got underground secure contacts to all the military and stuff like that. So this is where they may be running it. And this is where the president goes when he's under attack, and you can't get anything on it because it's emergency management. You can't get to these material. So that may be one of the places they're hiding it. And that makes sense that the head of emergency management in Canada actually gets the briefing, and they brought him down and showed him that this stuff is real. That's the kind of guy you need. So if you're the Minister of Defense, you really don't need to know, you don't need the briefing. But if you're a head of emergency management, so when Paul told this story, that was something that definitely confirmed that this is the real deal, that certain people are briefed on the subject.
Fascinating. I've got a question for it, Les, but we've got to do these questions. When I say it, I mean what you've just been speaking about, Grant. Go on, Les. Let's do it.
Okay, Andrew Sheehan. The orbs, which you were talking about at the top of the show, Grant, is talking about are they semi-transparent or solid objects?
Well, the ones that we film, I have a site, a website, a Facebook website called Orbology, where people post, and a lot of that stuff is it looks like it's more light forming type orbs flying around. They can go through walls and stuff like that. The ones we saw in 75 that were on the ground, the way they came, the first time I saw them, it was almost like the UFO sighting. The first one I saw, there was no doubt what I was looking at. And it was almost like they dragged me into it. And then I didn't really learn much after that. But what happened the first night, I had a guy, I'd bring people out to do whatever. And the guy had his camera set up and photo lens, and he was going to photograph, and we're waiting. It was just after sunrise, just after sunset, these things would sort of appear. So we're sitting there on this corner of this road, and the sun is going down, and it's getting darker and darker and darker, and there's nothing flying by or whatever. And all of a sudden I look around and I go, what's all these orange lights? And it was like oranges, like farm lights, but oranges. It's just unbelievable. And then I go, this is kind of weird. I've never seen this before. All these orange lights are on. And so we said, let's go find out one. So we go down this sort of side road, and we go across, and we drive maybe 5 miles. And in Manitoba, we have these, what they call mile roads. So it's a mile road and a mile road and a mile road and a mile road, and they're gravel roads, and then some crisscross pattern, north and south, east and west. So we're going along, and we're going the first mile road. There's nothing. We look down the mile road. There's nothing. And the orange light is still there. We go to the second one. We look down the road. Sitting right in the middle of the road. This big orange light sitting in the middle of the road. And I go, holy cow, what's going on the road? It's like, what is this? We turn down the road, and it always looks like it's about maybe a quarter mile down the road. This ball of light, can't really tell how big it is, but it's not as wide as the road, but it's in the road. Drive down half a mile, still sitting there in the same spot. We drive down a mile, and then they're burning stuff in the dump. They have a fire going in the dump, and we go, well, there's the fire, but there's objects still sitting in front of us. So we go down another mile road, and it's always the same. And we stop, and we turn the lights off, we look at it, and it's like, what's going on here? And we kept going. We got to the 8.25 mile road. So we go down 8 mile roads, and then suddenly there's a bridge. So the water, this is April, the water's all coming off, the snow's all melting, and the fields are all flooded. You can't see, it's only maybe a couple inches deep, but you can't, it looks like you're in the middle of a big lake, this road going to a big lake. And so we go there, and then I'm looking at it. It's on the bridge. I said, Jim, I can see it. It's sitting on the bridge. And it's like right there, and it's lighting up the bridge. And I'm going, this is pretty cool. So then we go up to the bridge, and thing's gone. Now it's not in front of us anymore. And we look behind us, not behind us. We go, this is weird. It's got to be under the bridge. So we get out of the car, and we got flashlights, and we're trying to look under the bridge, but the water's so high. It's a drainage bridge. So water is draining into this sort of a river. They make this sort of river, and it was right up to the bridge. So you really couldn't see. We're looking under and there's snow banks. We're trying to look under the bridge, and it's like, must have turned this light off. It had a light, and it turned the light off, and it's hiding under the bridge. So then we keep going north. We keep going north towards the U.S. border. We go about half a mile, and you don't see anything. And I look back and I go, Jim, it's behind us. It's on the bridge again. So we turn around, we go back on the bridge again, and it's gone. And we're looking around. It's got to be under this bridge. And we're looking. We're looking. We spent a long time looking. We gave up. So we go home. So we go back. We're heading north now, going away. Get about half mile down. I look back. I said, Jim, it's back on the bridge again. Let's go. So I said, instead of driving, this time, let's walk. So I had a movie camera, an 8mm movie camera. He had a binoculars. And so we take, and I knew it was going to take off again. It was going to disappear. So I take 7 steps, 3 seconds of film. 7 steps, 3 seconds of film. 7 steps, 3 seconds of film. And suddenly I'm right there. I'm at the bridge. And there's just this incline going up to the bridge. And I'm looking at this thing. And it's like, it's sitting on the bridge. And it was you'll hear this described. And this is where you can confirm that people are actually seeing stuff, because it doesn't make any sense. People will describe in the craft that the light is in the room. So this room is lit up and there's an open door, but the light doesn't go into the next room. The next room is totally dark, and they can't figure out like what it is. It's like some sort of fluid. The light is, and you can't tell where the light's coming from. It's like, and that's what it was. It was sitting on the edge of this bridge. I remember there's this wooden railings on the bridge, and it was sitting this far from the edge of the bridge. And I'm looking at it, and it wasn't lighting up the bridge. It was sort of like this orange glow. It was sort of this orange glow on the bridge, but it should have lit up the whole countryside. I'm going, and you couldn't even look at it. It was so bright. It was just bright. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, why isn't that lighting up the bridge? This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I'm looking at this thing. And then I figure like, okay, I'm close enough. And I said, Jim, hold the camera. I'm going to jump on it. So I'm getting ready. And then he says, hang on. He says, I think there's one sitting on top of the car. He said, what? One sitting on top of the car. And I'm about to run. I figured like, I knew there'd been a burning, because Falcon Lake, the famous Falcon Lake, is only a mile from an hour from my city. So I knew that you could get burned. If you touch this thing, you get burned. But I figured I got to touch this thing. I'm like the doubting Thomas in the Bible. I got to feel, I got to touch the wound. I got to touch this thing. And I figured by the time it takes off, I can jump and hit it, to make sure that it's actually there. And then my friend says, there's one sitting on top of the bridge, on top of the car. And I said, what? And then he gives me the binoculars. I turn around and I look, and here's this looks like, and they're looking in the north, and it looked like the sun coming up in the north. So you have the car sitting there, and there's this orange thing the size of the car, like a dome on top, orange glow, and this orange smoke hanging down the side of the car. And I'm going, it is sitting on top of the car. And I go, holy cow. And I start to run. I take about 3 steps. I go, oh, wow. And I look around, sure, about the one at the bridge is gone. So to run this decoy. So then I figure, well, we're committed now. Let's go. And the thing is moving, and we're running towards the car. And then it goes on the front of the car on the hood. And you can actually see it through the front and the back. And it looks like the inside of the car is on fire. It's just sitting there. And by the time we got there, it had gone down and into the water. And then we're looking around, and these orange lights are all around us. And they're sitting above the water. And I thought it looked like double ones, like sitting on top. But what it was, they were sitting there and they were giving a reflection off the water. So there's two orange lights. And it was so eerie. Like we're in the middle of nowhere and these orange lights around us. And then I look back and I go, Jim, it's back at the bridge again. Let's go. And then he goes, no, he says, I don't want to go. I want to go home. And then I go, no, come on. I got close. I want to jump on this thing. I want to touch it. He says, no, I don't want to go. And then it was his car. So then we had to give up. And I remember I saw this guy maybe 20 years later, and he'd become the spokesman for a $1 billion corporation. I remember I saw him at the main library in town, and I said, Jim, how you doing? And he's talking, and then he says, hey, you still on that UFO stuff? I said, yeah. I said, yeah, I'm still doing it. Yeah. And he says, you always were the gullible type. And I go, yeah, I swore, like, you, whatever. I was just like, I was furious. I mean, I don't care if you've never seen anything. I don't care what you think. But I what are you talking about? You were so scared at the bridge. You didn't want to go back. I want to go home. Now you're telling me I'm gullible? Are you? And he's backing away. I was like, oh, I was just furious. And then we just left it at that. And I saw him one time after that, and we didn't bring it up. But it was sort of weird. I was like, I couldn't believe that somebody was that close, but scared. He didn't want anything. And the next night we went out there because we started chasing these things. So the next night we'd go there. And because these mile roads are straight, you can actually turn your lights off in the dark and drive down these mile roads at 60 miles an hour. And I remember him, and he brought one of his friends, and he was chasing these things down these roads. And yet 20 years later, he had suddenly, got some reputation for himself, and he didn't want to be tied into this thing. And he was trying to pretend that nothing had happened. It's like, come on, you were standing there with me and you were so scared you didn't even want to go back. So that was the orbs.
So many things there, Grant. So many things that just parallel everything that we've been seeing and experiencing here. The fact that they're not throwing any great, they're absolutely vibrant and bright, but they're not throwing no great luminosity out anywhere, are they?
Yeah, and that's when you hear people tell stories of this weird light, you go, this person's telling the truth. I know what they're talking about. Because it doesn't make any sense. They're showing you things that don't make any sense in the real world. There's no way to explain that. The idea that it'd be very bright and not light anything up.
So see, Les is itching to ask another. Are you still good for questions, Grant?
Yep.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, Blue Shift is saying for Grant, it's a shout out. You got it right when you said, if you want to know, ask the contactees.
Yeah. I think we make the mistake of we think there's a phenomena out there. That's this idea about separation, that there's this phenomena out there that's interacting with us. And what we do is we use observation, which is going to be like the world is flat. And we're trying to count how many red ones and how many green ones and how many fast ones and slow ones and stuff like that. We've been doing that since 1947 and we haven't gotten anywhere. And it doesn't really matter. All the phenomena, the lights in the sky are telling you is there's something flying around and it probably ain't ours. That's all it proves to you. If you want to figure out what's going on, you've got to talk to the people who are interacting with the phenomena. And you can doubt them, do whatever you want, but at least talk to them. Because when it's like we were just talking about this light phenomena. When you start talking to them, you start seeing them talk about things that they're all saying basically the same thing, and it doesn't make any sense. Where they're for example, a lot of them will describe the fact there's no bathroom on the ship, or David Jacobs would do the thing where I always sort of say, when you start looking at maybe this is a biological being from another planet, because David Jacobs, they talk about, if you remember this thing where they do the mind scan, where the gray alien will get this far away from your eyes and look in your eyes and read your mind. And David Jacobs, as soon as the being, he's doing a mind scan, he's looking at my eyes, and then David Jacobs says, "Is he breathing?" And the person goes, "No, he's not breathing." And that's like, he's not breathing. Then is this really an extraterrestrial? And that's the whole thing where people will talk these weird sort of patterns that all describe the same thing. There's no, in the alien skin, there's no wrinkles. There's no blemishes. It's almost like it's plastic. They have legs that are like twigs, and people go, how can they stand on those legs? And it's the whole thing is the impression is when you start really looking at the thing, why doesn't it have a mouth? Why doesn't it have ears? If they're that advanced, how come they can't figure out the hair thing? I mean, all us guys, that have no hair, we got like, that's the first thing I'd do. I mean, if I had the technology, I'd be working on my hair. Forget about going to another planet. And it's like, and you start wondering, like, what are we really dealing with? Because when you start looking at the alien thing, it doesn't make any sense. Or people will say, like, people always, the contactees. So people will say, contactees will say, are we scared? Did they probe you? When I hear somebody is on the ship, I say, really? You saw the alien on a ship? I said, number one, you have a name? Well, who are you dealing with? And what you find out is they're always dealing with one being. Oh, I was dealing with Antaral. I was dealing with LB. And then they have a name for the person. And it's like, is this a spirit guide or is this an alien? Because there's one person that deals with them. So you get that pattern. And then you get the pattern where I say to them, hey, you saw it. Was he wearing any clothes? And the person goes, no, come to think of it, he didn't have any clothes on. And I said, you don't think that's weird? And they go, yeah, I never thought about it before. That is kind of weird. Didn't have any clothes on. And I say, hey, did he have any sex organs? Did he have any nipples or anything like that? And the person goes, no, I don't think so. And I said, isn't that kind of weird? Don't you think that's kind of weird? They wouldn't have any sex organs if he's a biological being. And that's when you start seeing these patterns, is you start wondering, like, what are we really dealing with? It can go through walls and stuff like that. Is this really a physical phenomena the way we think it is? Or can they project a physical phenomena and they can appear? Because there's even stuff with screen imaging, where the guy that invented the screen imaging idea was this, I always forget his name. He was one of the clients of John Mack. But anyway, he had the screen imaging thing where they were trying to teach him to write. And he was fighting all the time. He was fighting the aliens all the time. He didn't want to be part of this thing. And he said they would screen image, and they say, you're just screen imaging. You're not fooling me. I know who you are. You're not fooling me. And the being appeared one time as a military guy with a military uniform on. He said, you're just screen imaging. You're not a military guy. You're not fooling me. In fact, you got the wrong uniform on. He said, like that, boom, the uniform changed to the right uniform instantly. Yeah. And that's where you see like what we're seeing, and that we believe so much in what we see. But in the end, I think all our perceptions are going to be wrong. It's not what you think it is. And that's where you got to get the patterns of the contactees and to start showing these weird patterns of stuff and the message. So the message is almost always the same. It's love. It's oneness. It's we are one. You are part of us. We are part of you. You gotta quit fighting with each other. You gotta stop the nuclear weapons. It's always this sort of idea of, and it's the same with the channelers. Tell the same story. It's this: everything's alive, everything's conscious, everything's one. You've got to raise your consciousness. So that's the kind of messages you get, and that's where you got to go. I mean, even if you don't really believe them they are telling stuff that is extremely significant, that tells us that a lot of the stuff we're believing just by assuming what's going on with these crafts is going to be wrong.
Right. Are we doing another question, Les?
Yeah,
thank you, Grant.
Yeah,
Grant, just keep firing them away, providing Grant's okay. But I have a few
Andrew
things to ask.
Sheehan, is there any radar data which backs up the sightings Grant has investigated?
There are a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of radar data. I know with ours, we didn't have any radar data at Carmen because they were flying so low. So you have the problem where if it's very low, the radar is not going to pick it up from the Winnipeg radar. And the other thing is that if it's moving very slow, that's what happened with these Chinese balloons, where they shot the first one down, and then they picked up the next two, and everybody said, well, these UFOs were interfering. They shot down UFOs. No, it was they slowed the radar down. Instead of picking up objects that were moving at the speed of jets, they started putting the radar and getting to look at targets that were moving at the speed of balloons. And suddenly they picked up all these balloons, these Chinese balloons, because they changed the radar. But again, the radar just gives you the impression that something's going on, that this is real, that it can appear as physical type stuff, that it can go from one part. I mean, there's a guy who was a NORAD commander on the west coast of Canada who told the story in 1959. He was a NORAD commander where he comes on shift, and they said, oh, by the way, there's a UFO on the end of the runway. And he said, really? So they're watching this thing. And then he said he scrambled the jets. And he said instantaneously, and this thing moved 50 miles down the coast off the Pacific Ocean. Instantaneously, watched it on a radar, just boom, boom, like that. So again, but it doesn't really tell you anything. It just tells you that, yeah, we're dealing with something, and it's probably not our stuff. So, but it doesn't tell you what's going on. It's like sightings. It's a little bit better than sightings, but.
Okay. Do you want to move on, Paul?
We can do, Les, and apologies if we don't get a lot of questions out here, because I'm sure there's going to be plenty in there, Les.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll let you discuss.
Let's just come back to them though for 10 minutes before we wind this down. But yeah, that's great, Les. Just staying with radar then, Grant. I don't mean it clashes with your theory, because I'm on the same page as you. I think we're a lot of this, but just like with radar and you talked about Area 51 and chasing these things, there's a very physical aspect to it as well. So it's not all inside or conjurings of the mind or what we want it to be. How do we bridge that one?
Again, you got to be careful about your perceptions, because how many stories have I heard? In fact, I was involved in one. I was involved with Angela Joyner. Angela Joyner was the girl who broke the Stevensville story about the going over the Bush Ranch, the Whitehorse Bush Ranch, all the sightings in Stevensville, Texas. She was a reporter. I was with her. We were going to do a book on the presidents, and we were in the house, and her husband comes home from work, and he says, come outside, there's a UFO. Come outside, there's a UFO. And we went outside, and it was, I can't even remember what it looked like. It was really weird. It didn't look like a saucer or anything like that, but it was sort of like, what is that? And it was like in the daylight, and it was just flying along very slow. And it flew off, and we all stood there watching this thing. And all of a sudden, the jet came. It's heading for Dallas. And the jet came after it. And then next thing, there was another jet coming after it. So you assume that there's these UFOs that people are seeing, and that jets are chasing them and try to shoot them down. May not be the whole story, because you get these stories where, if you listen to this latest interview that Lakatsky said, he said, we've now confirmed there is Men in Black. We now confirmed it. And then they said, what do you mean, Men in Black, like the government? No, he said them. They're Men in Black. But he said they're using reverse psychology. This is this thing about perception. They're using reverse psychology. So somebody comes to your door, these two people, they're wearing weird clothes, they're doing a survey or whatever after you have a UFO experience the morning after. They want to ask you these questions or whatever, and then they walk away and you go, that was weird. These Men in Black people, what they're doing at my door. And it's like, what is that? And he said they're using reverse psychology. Instead of getting you and saying, don't talk about the sighting, they're drawing you in. They say, don't talk about the sighting. And then you go tell everybody, like, this guy came to my house and he threatened me, and these jets were chasing the UFO and stuff like that. And they're using reverse psychology. They're dragging you into it. They're doing that sort of stuff. So when you see a jet, it may actually be them. And that's the thing with black helicopters. You have in 1975, when they shut down the nuclear missiles in Malmstrom Air Force Base, there was helicopters all over the place, unidentified helicopters flying all over the place. So were those actual military helicopters, or were they pretending to be helicopters? And that's this idea that they're dragging you in. They're making these events. So if you're an experiencer and you come, and
why, Grant? Why would they do that? Why not just, if they want you to talk about it and want you to, proclaim to the world what you've just seen and experienced, why create a jet that's got sound, like a physicality to it? Why not just give the message out that we want you to share this?
Because it's not a left brain phenomena. It's never going to land on the White House lawn and give you a left brain speech. We're from Alpha Centauri and we want you to do this. That's what we do. We go into another country and we say, we're here to bring you freedom, democracy, Jesus, and McDonald's. And the people point guns and say, get the hell out of our country. And that's not what they're doing. They're doing the right brain thing. They're doing the awe and curiosity thing. What is going on here? And they make you figure it out. They're never going to land and tell you the story. There's even a story that was told by Martin Luther, the great theologian who started the Lutheran Church. There was a seance done with Martin Luther, and they asked Martin Luther the same question, except about God. And basically the question was, why doesn't God get off his big fat rear end and come down and tell us what's going on? And then he said, because doubt is part of the equation. If your soul were to realize what was going on, it would create wings and fly away and never be seen again. This is the whole idea. It's doubt. It's like you don't know what's going on. You're trying to figure it out. If you have all the answers to the equation, if they come down and give you the answers to the test, it's not a test. So it's this theory of, wow, they're doing these weird things that sort of you can't figure it out. And some people believe it's this, some people believe it's that, but everybody's trying to figure it out. So everybody talks about it. Like people ask questions. What about the helicopters? What about the shutting the nuclear missiles down? What about, and I think all of it's the same thing. They just want you to wonder, like, how do they shut the missiles down? How do they drop this metal? What's this metal? Like, what's it made of? And you even have the weird stuff, like the one metal fragment from that Gary Nolan has from the Ubatuba thing. And I laughed when I saw this because this is classic theory. Wow. He has the same crash. Two pieces from the same crash. One has the isotopes completely normal, and the other one, the isotopes are all messed up. The same crash. And that's the thing, is you can see the beings are going, they're just laughing. It's like, can you believe it? Look at the look on his face. Holy cow, he can't figure that one out. And they do these weird things, like why do they layer 83 pieces of bismuth and magnesium and layer all this stuff? Because everybody's going to go, look at this. Holy cow, what is this? And it's the idea that doubt and awe and curiosity are what motivate you. They're motivating us to move down the road, but they're not giving us the answers. They're doing the same as God. They're staying in the background and they're giving you these little hints, and they want you to figure out. That's why we're here. I mean, we come through the river of forgetfulness. When we are in the spirit world, we know all the answers to everything. We know how everything works. We agree to become forgetful and forget all the answers to come in to learn stuff. And unless you forget everything, if you know everything, you're not gonna do anything.
Well, thank you. It's a great answer. And you talked about shutting down nuclear missiles, and I don't want to go exactly there with this one, but look, you'll be familiar with Rendlesham Forest. You'll be familiar with Charles Holt.
Yeah.
No doubt you'll have met him, I would have thought, over the years. I've met him a few times. And tell us about the Charles Holt apport. You've got knowledge on that, I'm assuming.
The coin that rolls along the floor, that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, where he said that, and then you get that whole thing. Like he didn't know what it was, but he said, that changed my life. That coin rolls across and hit him in the boot, and he looks down and it's this British pound coin or whatever, and he's going like, what is going on? And that's the whole thing. So they're using, same with the nuclear weapons. That's just a sign. That's just a symbol. And so you get the thing with people don't know this, and I pointed this out because my initial story started with nuclear weapons. They had put in 100 new nuclear weapons about 60 miles south of the border near where I live. And that's when the UFOs all appeared, when they put these new nuclear weapons in the United States. And it was, we couldn't figure it out for 30 years. I went back to Bob Deemer at the airport. I said, Bob, why were they in Carmen? Carmen has nothing. It's this little town. There's nothing here. He said, you know why they're here? And I said, no, Bob, I don't know why they're here. 30 years. I worked on this thing for 30 years. I still don't know why they came to this little town of Carmen. He said, I told you. The nuclear missiles. I told you. It's the nuclear missiles. I told you, I talked to the Air Force guy at the border, at the border. Don't be telling you that story. And they tried to ram it, and this guy pulled out, and the thing disappeared. And they were told to ram this thing over a nuclear missile. When the Malmstrom thing happened in 1975, that's when Linda Howe got involved. So I got dragged in. Bud Hopkins got dragged in by his sighting. Linda Howe gets a phone call from her brother. Her brother's a helicopter pilot at Malmstrom Air Force Base. And he said, Linda, there's UFOs over the nuclear weapons storage areas. And then she goes, really? And that's how she got involved in UFOs. She got dragged down the rabbit hole. Same as Stephen Greer did his first CE5 in 1975. All sorts of people got dragged down the rabbit hole in 1975. So 1975, people don't realize there was what was called the Northern Tier cases. There was at Loring Air Force Base, which is where they had the SAC base, which had the nuclear, they put them on the B-52 bombers and nuclear weapons. They had Wordsworth Air Force Base, which is a SAC base in Michigan on the Canadian border. They had Malmstrom Air Force Base that had all the UFOs and the cattle mutilations and the helicopters in 1975. And Minot Air Force Base, which is just south of me, they had UFO in 1975, all at the same time. And it was all picked up. And NORAD was saying, do not link these sightings. There was an actual message that came out, do not link the sightings, because all these bases all got hit at the same time. End of October, beginning of November. You know what happened in November of 1975? Travis Walton was
right. Yeah, I see. Yeah.
November the 5th, 1975. While this nuclear missile saw, I said, most people don't know. I discovered this. If you look at, he was gone from the 5th to the 10th. Every night that Travis Walton was gone, there was a UFO over a nuclear missile silo in the United States. Every single night. And you say, is that coincidence? I say, no, that's not coincidence. But it doesn't give you a direct thing. It's like, why are they over the nuclear missiles? And everybody starts trying to figure it out. And then you get these contactees are saying, the aliens are telling us to stop the nuclear missile stuff. And then you get the thing with the cattle mutilations. So people say, what's with the cattle mutilations? Why are they mutilating cattle? And so the guy, Perkins, is the guy with the biggest cattle mutilation collection in the world. He's got the Gaia theory. And he said, it's a theory of Gaia. It happens. And he said all cattle mutilations, if you look on the map, and he put them all on the map, he's got the biggest collection of all. He said, if you look, they're all connected to nuclear weapon testing, downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities, from nuclear power plants, from where they build the weapons. He said, wherever they are, he said, there was one, I think he said in Minnesota or something. He said, they put one and they watched. Within a couple of weeks after they opened that place, there was cattle mutilations there. And you got to put this together. So the one guy puts it together and he said, it's all connected to nuclear missiles.
And all these are links that people haven't been looking for, aren't they? That these are. But
eventually we figure it out. You get one guy figures it out, and we start to realize this is not some random phenomena that's going. They're giving us these indirect signals. It's what I call the theory of wow, these weird things where they get people going, what is going on? And everybody's running around and people are spending money. And that's what they're trying to do now is they're trying to get money because the black ops have it. So they're working on the program. And what you have is these new programs of researchers and scientists who are saying we need answers. We're going through Congress. But what they want is they want to draft off of government financing because almost all research money that's done in the United States is given up by the U.S. government. So they've got all the money. They got $900 billion defense budget. So if you are a UFO researcher or someone like scientists working on the thing, you've been in a program or whatever, and you want to get an invention to make millions of dollars, what are you going to do? You're going to try to get the government to fund research so you can get the research and then you can get your patent. So the government's not going to release it because they want to build weapons with it and they don't want the Russians to get it. And the scientists that are working on it, they're not going to give it up either because they're waiting for a patent. The one Tim Taylor, who was the one guy who was getting downloads, the one invention, he told me the story. He's from NASA, and he had the download. And that one company that he sold, he had the one patent. He told me the last thing I remember the night when I got that idea in my head, the one they put on the space shuttle that actually ended up in this patent that he got. He said, the last thing I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed. I said, really, Tim? Could you see its face? He said, no, I couldn't see its face. I said, you should go to Yvonne Smith and get regressed and find out who this being was. And he had this idea, and he's got 44 patents, all medical inventions, where he sits and he goes into this thing. He sleeps for 8 hours. He gets up, goes back to bed for an hour. He gets a big glass of water. He sits in the sun in Florida on his deck, and he drinks the water, and they start to talk to him. And he's encounter, and he's getting this download material from these beings. So if you get the one invention, the company sold, I don't know how much of the invention was of the company, but the company sold for $100 million on NASDAQ. So this is worth some money. If you get alien biological material or you get some sort of patent thing on energy, stuff like that, this is worth a lot of money. And that's why you've got all the cover up is everybody's trying to make money from this thing. Everybody's trying to keep it secret for their own purposes, the military, the inventors and stuff like that. and the phenomena is just doing this weird stuff and forcing the issue. They're forcing people to explore.
Well, we won't go down the road of asking you about disclosure, simply because we've got about 10 minutes left. And before we go back to Les, where can people contact Grant Cameron and find out more about your work?
Okay. My books are.
One sec, Grant. I'm saying this, and I dare say Les will put a load of links and bits in the stream anyway. But for the bits that he hasn't, perhaps just infill.
Yeah, I have a publishing company called It's All Connected, all one word. It's All Connected. And if you search It's All Connected and books, it'll take you to the book page where I've written 20 books that are on there, and other books. It's All Connected was a publishing company that I set up to help people. If you've had a sighting, and I say you're on board the ship, and they go, yeah. Do you ever write this thing down for your kids? No, I never did. I think you should write it down. I think you should write it down for your kids, and because now you can do self-publishing. You can self-publish one book. It costs you $5 to ship it to you, and you can put the book on your shelf. Never sell it to anybody, and your kids will know when you die that you were involved in this and what your story was. And so I help people. I hear a good story and I say you should write a book. We'll help you, show you how to publish the book, and so they write the book, and then we show them how to to publish the book and stuff like that, and they go on their way. So we do a lot of that. I'm on Grant Cameron at Twitter. I have a blog site, White House UFO. Blogspot, if you search that, and on Facebook I'm at Presidential UFO. And the other thing I have is I have the podcast, which is called Paranormal UFO Consciousness Podcast, which I started a couple of years ago, where I do interviews which go across the spectrum, from UFOs to consciousness to channeling to all the weird stuff, because as it said, it's all connected. It's all the same thing. We got to quit parsing this stuff.
Fabulous. Thank you, Grant. And I'm going to pull Les in, and we'll do for the last 5-10 minutes some more questions, if that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Les.
Thank you. I've got this one from Fred Flintstone. The UFO beings are so far ahead of us in scientific development. Why do you think they bother with us? What motivates them?
Well, they're here to help. That's my impression. No matter what anybody says, that they're ahead of us. That's why I say the experiencers will say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. They know the answer to everything in the universe. They don't need it. They're not physical. They don't have anything physical. They're minimalists. They don't eat. They don't drink. They don't sleep. They don't do anything. They just do this work thing. So they don't need our money. They don't need our women. They don't need our anything like that. They're here. They may be doing some sort of biological stuff where they're putting people on other planets, which we get offended with. We're not too upset when someone says we were planted on this planet and brought here. But if we're helping put on people on another planet, then we're all upset that they can't take our eggs and our sperm or whatever. So there may be some of that going on. But basically, it's all this messaging thing. They're doing this messaging thing where 1947. That's when it basically broke out, when we detonated the atomic bomb. And what people have been told over and over again is when you detonate an atomic bomb, it affects not only you, it affects all the way, the energy goes through the universe, through the earth to the other side. It affects everything in the universe because everything is connected. That's what we keep forgetting. We say, I can detonate a nuclear bomb. It's not going to affect anybody else. Everything is connected. So when you ring the bell, when you detonate an atomic bomb, the entire bell rings all through the universe, and they all go, the kids have got the matches, let's go. And then they have this whole thing. How do we get through these people without landing and telling them what's going on? So then they do the grade 1 class does this, the grade 2 class does that. And they do this weird thing where they lead us along. And we have advanced where people are starting to figure it out. They're starting to get these things. And you have people who are like the idea, God talks to everybody, but only certain people are listening. There are people who have agreed to come in, and they'll tell you, they agreed to come in to play a role, and they are interacting with these beings, and they are putting out these messages for the world, because they can't come down and give us the messages. They can't. This is non-interference thing. They can't interfere. But if you have before your life, somebody is one of the aliens, say I'm a gray in my last lifetime, and I decide I want to help, then I'm going to be born as a human. Then I'm not interfering. I'm not doing that thing where I'm interfering with the thing. You're coming in to help. So you'll see a lot of people running around who are saying that they are they're working with the aliens, and that they are putting the message out for the aliens, and that alien is their family. Even if you take a look at the famous musician, sold 54 million albums, John Denver in the United States. He believed he was from the constellation Lyra. He wrote a song called Spirit, which was released after he died. It talks about all the stars in the Lyra constellation. He actually believed he was from Lyra. And Patti Smith, the first woman to sing on Saturday Night Live, believed she was extraterrestrial. She basically said it. There's a lot of famous musicians who claim that they were from somewhere else. And it's the whole idea, we come here. So whether you come here to learn how to use envy, we always make the mistake that we think we're coming into the world as a random thing. We just came in here on chance. We didn't. We came in here, and if you go to Michael Newton stuff, he talks about people before they're born. They go in this big amphitheater, and they're watching all the things. Who are going to meet this person? This is happening. They're seeing their life as it unfolds, and they got to remember, I got to meet this person. I got to do this. I got to do that. And Michael Newton's asking them questions, and the guy says, "Hey, leave me alone. I gotta know what to do. I gotta know who to meet. Quit asking me all these questions. You're bothering me," because he's back in real time. And that's the whole thing. It's not a random world. We come in to do certain things. They're coming in to do certain things. We're doing certain things. It's not a random world. And they're moving the world along to elevate. And we're trying to elevate people by teaching our children. We're trying to elevate them. Everybody's trying to make the world a better place. We may have some bizarre idea, which comes down to the idea of separation. Once you believe there's separation, that you're the bad guy, I'm the good guy, that's when everything starts falling apart. But if you realize we're all one and we raise each other up, and that's what made the United States of America the greatest country in the world. It was the United States of America. It may not be the greatest country in the world anymore because it's no longer the United States of America. It's divided. You can see it's dividing into segments, the blues and the reds and the divisions and stuff like that. And when you get separation, that's when you get trouble. It's the idea that if we work together, we will elevate all the water lifts all boats.
Oh, Grant, absolutely detailed answer. How many questions you got there, Les?
Whoa, 12 on my list, and probably
well,
more.
we're never going to be able to go on, but Grant, just a few condensed replies to 3 or 4 questions, maybe. And that's difficult for you, I can tell, because you like to give us the meat and potatoes of the answer. That's great.
John Alexander, hi, great show as always. Does Grant think the phenomena he has seen are visitors, or they have always been? Yeah.
Well, as I said, I now believe there is no out there. It's all here now. It's all singularity. It's like a remote viewer. He isn't going anywhere. He's just going within himself. There is no time. There is no space. It's all Maya. It's all consciousness. It's all one thing. So they're here. We're here. Everything's here. There is no stuff out there. It's all within the mind. It's all built with consciousness.
Thank you.
Steve 71, Grant, have you been into Alaska Triangle to investigate the multiple accounts of UFOs, cryptids, and possible hidden bases?
I've heard about the bases. The remote viewers talk about the bases there. I'm actually on a cruise in September 6th to the 13th. Anybody that likes to go on cruises, there's going to be a cruise going out of Seattle, Washington, up to Alaska. I'm going to be on the cruise. Danny Sheehan, who's the guy who's doing all the interviews for all the Senate intelligence whistleblowers, is going to be on the cruise. Richard Doty is going to be on the cruise. Sims, the alien abduction expert, is going to be on the cruise. And so for a week, you can listen to people lecture day and night about UFOs for a week. So we're going up to Alaska, so maybe we'll check out the base there.
I were invited on it as well. I was invited, but I turned it down. And that's my loss. Yeah. Absolutely my loss. And I'd have loved to have spent more time with Rick Doty because I enjoyed his company last time we met. But yeah, fire away.
Question from Nick is, if there is time, please, can we ask a Grant about Antarctica? What do you know about Antarctica?
I think we're going to have Grant back again.
Yeah, I don't really believe the Antarctica stories. I think that's disinformation that's being put out there. I live in the coldest major city in the world. And the idea was that these things are like a half a mile underground. We know how much snow falls. It's not going to be that deep underground after 80 years. It would still be pretty close to the surface. And I just don't believe the Antarctic stuff. I think that's disinformation that's been put out.
Okay, thank you.
I might just be able to squeeze this one in from Mark Anderson. Grant, I have been researching for AI and applying it to the UFOs. My analysis is that only applying AI on humans that have been affected by UFOs are their experiences, abductees, etc.
I can talk about AI quickly. I mean, this is this idea that if you take a look at the experiences, they're going to describe what's going to happen 1,000 years from now. When I wrote the book, UFO Sky Pilots, 36 people who've flown the craft, they all basically came to me. I didn't really find them. They all came to me. He told me the story that the craft is alive, the craft is consciousness. So when you have AI, if you have a system that's made out of mechanical stuff, it cannot ever be true AI. True AI is biological. When you can put biological boards, Steve Mira from your country talks about this. He worked on biological boards, computer boards. When you put biology into it, you can teach something. And the example I show is a 2004 video. If you put in a Google search, put in rat brain and put in F-22 simulator, and it will pop up a video from 2004, the University of Southern Florida. And this is where this technology is all going with the flying the craft with your mind. They have a 10,000 neurons, 20,000 neurons of a rat brain. They take them, they put them in a petri dish, and then they put wires into the bottom of the petri dish, and they put it into an F-22 simulator. Remember, this is White World 2004, 20 years ago. And they put it in, and then they send a signal. So if the plane is going this way, they give it a signal, and the rat brain moves it this way. Then they put it up and down, same thing. And they have these signals. High frequency, it puts down a low frequency, and it goes. And they actually show on this video. And next thing you know, this rat brain with 20,000 neurons is flying the F-22 simulator. Then they change the weather, and they put wind and all this kind of stuff and crosswinds and stuff like that. And the thing figures it out and it's flying it. That's White World. And if you go back to the movie Firefox, this is already almost like the government put it in Firefox, where Clint Eastwood steals the Russian jet. And they've got the head thing where they can now do it, where you send a signal with because they can read your mind with people with amputees. They pick up the signal. Imagine picking up something, and then you can pick up the signal, and then they can reproduce the signal, and the biological arm will work it. This is already in the works. This is why they're working, that we can move things in our mind, but it's got to be a biological system. It can't be a mechanical system. It has to have biology involved with it.
Grant, you've just took us to the end.
You took us right to the end, Grant. Thank you very much.
And I've had to do nothing. That's thank you so much for spending 2 hours with us, and the people who've been listening, I'm sure they've been absolutely riveted to what you've had to share with us. So I'm just going to say, Grant, thank you very much. Would you come back?
Sure.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, and I was just going to do a little bit of housekeeping here. I've got to thank Karen Beerman for the monetary donation to the channel tonight. Always appreciated. Thank you very much. I've got to apologise for all the questions that I didn't get asked tonight.
Save them for
Grant
next
has
time.
been so fabulous that it's been absolutely amazing. And but I'm sure if Grant comes back, we can probably get some of these questions reread. And thanks for everybody who's supporting us in the chat tonight. And we're going to see you all on Sunday, is it, Paul?
Sunday, yeah, 7 p.m. And thank you.
And thank you again, Grant Cameron.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for what you do.
You're welcome.
We're all doing our jobs.